Okay, it is 3 o'clock, so let's start this meeting. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to DCA's Stakeholder Engagement Committee meeting. It's being held via teleconference, Ring Central, on Thursday, November 5th, 2020. So could we please have the roll call?
Hello, everyone. Chair Palmer.
Here.
Vice Chair Keegan.
Here.
Committee Member Swenson.
Here.
Committee Member Whaley. Committee Member Berrigan-Priya.
Here.
Committee Member Giacomo. Committee Member Glosky. Committee Member Welch.
Here.
Committee Member Shia. Committee Member Moreno.
Here.
Committee Member Cosio.
Here.
Committee Member Gonzalez-Potter.
Here.
Committee Member Cox.
Here.
Committee Member Tarango.
Here.
Committee Member Wallace.
Here.
Committee Member Mann. Committee Member Liebig.
Here.
Committee Member Lytle.
Present.
Committee Member Moran.
Here.
Committee Member Tayaba. And then Peter's absent. Committee Member Robertson. Committee Member Merlot. Committee Member Worth.
Here.
Committee Member Hardesty.
Here.
And then let's just go back through to see if we missed anyone. Committee Member Whaley. Sorry. Committee Member Giacomo.
Here. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you. Committee Member Glosky. Committee Member Mann. Committee Member Robertson. And Committee Member Merlot. Well, we have a quorum.
Great. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Chair Sarah Palmer, and thanks for joining us. And we appreciate you taking the time to participate in this process and provide your thoughts on ways we can provide a community focus on the engineering aspects of the proposed conveyance project. And so for the record, this meeting is being conducted via Ring Central and teleconference to ensure we're adhering to the requirements related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So just to repeat something you've all heard, the purpose of the SEC is to create a forum for Delta stakeholders to provide input and feedback on technical and engineering issues related to the DCA's current activities. The SEC is a formal advisory body to the DCA Board of Directors. It is subject to the public transparency laws applicable to local public agencies like the Brown Act and the Public Records Act. So we have several practices for the virtual meetings. So the SEC discussion process and public comment period will remain consistent with our past meetings. So in terms of our comments and questions, during the discussion portions of our meeting, the SEC members will use the raise hand function within Ring Central. And you'll see that usually, I think it's at the bottom of your screen. And then Ms. Martinez will call the name of the SEC member to make a comment or ask a question. As in past meetings, SEC members will have complete control of their video and audio at all times. We request that you keep your video on to make for a better meeting. Love to see people's faces. We'll also ask that everyone make themselves, when you're not talking, try to mute yourself to eliminate unintended background noise. That way we won't get so much feedback. In terms of public comment, given this Ring platform, attendees will be muted and not have a video option unless they are speaking during public comment. And this is for the non-SEC members. At that point, we will unmute you, and it'll be up to you, the speakers, whether or not you activate your video. So that's under your control. If you you wish to provide public comment on agenda items, please complete the online public comment by 4 p.m. There's a form. The link can be found on the dcdca.org website on the SEC agenda. Once we get to that point in the meeting, our facilitator, Valerie Martinez, will call out to each person to speak, and the line will be opened, and the speaker will provide public comments. The public may also provide written public comment by email to, and it's just public comment, it's all one word, public comment at dcdca.org. All written comments received prior to the conclusion of the meeting will be included in the written record for the meeting, but will not be read during the meeting. We will follow the same process for public comment on non-agendized items. As always, I want to remind our committee members, as well as the public, that topics being discussed in this venue are engineering and construction logistics related to a proposed conveyance project. We ask that discussions please stay on topic. All we can address is what is within the DCA purview. So finally, as part of our housekeeping, I want to introduce our two new members to the SEC. The first is Chief David Welsh, and he is our ex officio member representing Cortland Fire Department. So welcome. I also want to introduce our newest SEC member, Gia Moreno, who's representing the community of Hood. So we're very glad to get a good representative of the Hood community. And so I'd like to give each of you a moment to introduce yourselves. So first, Chief Welsh, can you introduce yourself, please? Are you on?
Hello, my name is David Welch. I'm the fire chief for the Cortland Fire Protection District, but I also live in Hood. So, and I'm glad Gia is now a part of this. She's a great voice for our community. But again, David Welch, Fire Chief, Cortland.
Excellent. Okay, Gia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Gia Moreno. I am the Hood representative. I grew up in Hood, and I'm a fifth generation Hood resident, and I'm really honored to be able to be part of this process.
Wonderful. And we're very glad to have you as representatives. It's a most welcome addition.
Sarah, before we move on, it looks like we have a hand. Barbara.
Yeah. Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say, Chair Palmer, sometimes people go on and off video because of internet connection. It loosens it up a little bit. At this time of day when we have meetings, I have 2 college students and another working adult in my home. Internet competition is fierce. So I understand what you're saying, but I just want you to know that's the reason for disappearing, okay?
I understand completely. Many of my friends have the same issues, homework and everything else, so that's perfectly understandable. Hopefully we will be able to see you from time to time, but other than that, you know how to run that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. That probably pertains to a number of us, I'm sure. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item 3, which is the minutes. For minutes review, does anyone have any changes, comments, or questions about the minutes? And please note, you will have until Friday to make adjustments by sending those comments to Jasmine Runquist. Does anyone have any comments or changes? No? Jasmine, we have no one? Okay. Then let's, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I was just letting you know comments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Jasmine. Okay, so let's get on to number 4. So we've got 4A, and now I will ask our DCA Executive Director, Catherine Mellon, sorry, geez, what's wrong with me? Catherine Mellon, to introduce our discussion on the deferred SEC questions. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So what we did was go through the database of all of the comments that had been asked in the past meetings and looked for ones where we said we weren't ready to answer those, and we'll do that in a future meeting. So that's really what this is sort of a cleanup of the database, mostly around the East and Central discussions that we've been having. and represents a wrap-up of making sure that we've covered the questions that have been asked and requests for future topics. And we've got 5 different DCA presenters, because there's quite a wide array of questions that we're covering with this. So Jasmine, you mind the next slide? So these are the 11 topics that have come up. And so for each topic, we'll have a brief description of the question that was asked, and then a slide or 2 covering that topic. So without going through this list, we'll be going through it in the presentations. Let's just keep moving. First one was around coordination with Port of Stockton, particularly around sustainability. A request that we work together with the port, and that it's very important to help them improve their sustainability and help make them a clean port. And that any time that community benefit opportunities may exist to help the port become a model of sustainable facilities, that we should consider that. So next slide. So we did actually have a call with the port a few months ago as part of introducing them to the project, looking into opportunities of barging through the port. And in that meeting, we also brought up what they were doing around sustainability. And there's 2 programs that they're running. The Delta Environmental Enhancement Program, where they largely partner with local organizations that do work in the Delta area. And that program is mostly focused on enhancing air quality, water quality, and habitats in the Delta surrounding areas. So I think that's a program where there may be opportunities to partner with them. And then they're also a voluntary member of this Green Marine organization, and there's an environmental certification process that goes with that. And the program helps industry share best practices nationally, and they grade themselves from a scale of 1 to 5 on 13 key areas of performance. And every year they release an annual report that demonstrates how they've been doing in those categories. And I've read the reports the last 2 years, and there's lots of opportunity there for us to partner with them, because a lot of our goals around sustainability are very much in line with this certification program. So we're a few years away from construction, but these are just 2 examples of programs that exist with the port, where I think there can definitely be synergy between the Delta Conveyance program and the Port of Stockton. Does anyone have any questions on that? I don't mind asking questions as we go through each one of these, because they're going to be quite unique topics rather than one
Barbara,
presentation.
Barbara does have her hands up. Yes, go ahead, Barbara. And just again, for clarification, like Catherine was just saying, after each of these, I think there's an opportunity for some clarifications. After the entire presentation, there can be some discussion if folks would like. So Barbara, you have a clarification?
I want to give you a heads up, Catherine. I appreciate you meeting with them, and we're very well aware of their programs. The port has received 2 letters in the last 90 days from CARB for failure to do appropriate community outreach, and was really taken to task for not doing a proper community outreach around air quality and issues. Working with them through the AB 617 process has been extremely difficult. Their idea of working with community is coming in, commandeering a meeting, and laying down the law what they will or won't do, and not listening. And it's not just me. There's 92 people involved in the AB 617 process here. So we're aware of the Green Marine program. It's just kind of coming in. They're not meeting standards quickly. And I think there's just something for you to keep in the back of your mind. I'm working with people here from the business community, not the environmental community, that are equally concerned about the port not moving to be a clean port and using tech fast enough. So they have nice brochures, but I want you to be aware that there's a lot of issues there, and we need help pressuring that cleanup if your project moves forward, because that area is just really, it's awful.
Okay.
Thank you.
that conversation will keep going with the port over time.
Okay.
All right, next slide. There are quite a few questions around what the features that will be left behind on each of the sites and how visible these facilities might be from freeways or other local roadways. Next. So we've given you project booklets that have covered the site plans for construction and also post-construction. Those are those yellow and red boundary maps that we've given you. We've included photos of the sites and included logistics routes. And we've just created another book for you all. It's a render book. And what we've done is we've created renders of each of the sites, or at least a typical site, so that you get an idea of what the leave behind is. And we're going to show that to you next. So you've seen this one. This is the render of a typical intake. This happens to be the intake 5 site, but the intake design is similar at the intake 3 site. You have the Sacramento River with the intake structure and fish screens along the river, the sedimentation basins to remove the solids, the flow control structure that controls the flow going into the tunnel shaft, and that's the entry into the tunnel as the water heads south towards the southern complex. And then there's some drying beds as we remove solids from the sed basin. They need a place to dry out before they're hauled off site. So this is the intakes. Next. This is a new render, and this is a typical launch shaft site. This happens to be Twin Cities launch shaft site. You'll see the dual shafts over to the left. If you recall, we're tunneling in 2 different directions there, one towards the intakes and the other one south. So there's dual shafts there. And then in the background there is the RTM stockpile. I show it in brown here just so that you can get a better idea of what the land requirements are. That's about 100 acres, 20 feet high. If you recall, we talked about making that material available to various local beneficiaries of borrow material. I think if you flip it, that turns green, Jasmine. Yeah. So we plan to put hydro seed on it. It won't be a dirt pile. It'll appear at least green when it's when there's wet and rainy season, and it'll dry out like the rest of the grasses in the area. But the rest of this site, as we talked about, would be returned to reclamation to agricultural use. And this would be a typical layout for the launch shaft sites. So, and here's a typical reception shaft or maintenance shaft, a single shaft on the site with access roads coming off of the local roads, maintenance and parking area there, and then a ramp heading up to a working platform right near the shaft. And as we said before, these sites are around 10 acres. So this is very typical of what the reception and maintenance shaft sites would look like at the end of construction. Pumping plant, you've seen this one. What we did is we just blew it out just a little bit so that you could put the pumping plant in context to the southern forebay. Next. And there's a close-up of the render of the pumping plant right there on the northern side of the southern forebay. It's about a 25 acre site with about 4 different facilities on that site related to the tunnel flow coming in and then pumping the flow into the southern forebay. And the last one, and again, this is another one that you've seen showing the southern forebay, and there's a tunnel from the southern forebay down to the South Delta outlet and control structure, which connects the Delta conveyance water into the existing California aqueduct. And then the California aqueduct control structure built into the aqueduct so that you can control the flow range from both of these water flow sources. So we've put these on 11 by 17 sheets, and we'll be printing those and distributing that out to the committee so that you have these as a communication tool for talking about what the final facilities will look like on each site. all of these you've seen before, except for the shaft site renders that we've done. And does anyone have any questions on those?
Sean has his hand up.
For
Sean?
the intake render, there was a suggestion to carry that riparian band of trees through to the other side of the screens, between the screens and the settling pond. The fact that it's not in the render, does that mean that's not being considered anymore?
No, that means the render was done before that comment, and we haven't done the landscape design. That'll come in a later phase, but that comment is definitely recorded.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. All right, next slide.
Douglas also has his hand up.
Right.
Are you gonna get one for the Bethany Reservoir too?
Yeah, at next meeting, we're hoping to cover the Bethany pump station and surge control facilities and have a render of those facilities ready for the next meeting. The renders take a bit of time, and we just now have enough CAD drawings in order to do a render.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Karen Mann. Karen? You might want to unmute yourself, Karen. Karen?
Hello.
There you are. Okay.
If you push enough buttons, you make it through. Catherine, thank you very much for the explanation. Can we go back? I think it was 2 slides. I was wondering if you had a, yeah, right there. Do you have a little, so that we kind of have an idea, how much distance are you looking at between Highway 4 that's north and this pumping plant? And I'm kind of curious as to what properties are on the westerly side of the southern forebay. Do you have that information there?
Hey, Phil. Hey, Phil, can you unmute yourself? It's my recollection that it's about 1.5 miles from the pumping plant up to Highway 4, but that's just my recollection. You might know better.
Well, to put it in perspective, from the pumping plant to the launch shaft is about 1 mile. So if you want to swing that around,
Yeah.
So you're close, Catherine. I think it might be a little further.
Okay.
1 mile. Okay. And to the left of that, if I could find out just a little bit more about that, because I know that there's homes over there, and I'm just trying to figure out how close we are.
Basically, that left side is those big WAPA and PG&E power corridors.
Okay.
And they're pretty wide, so they run all the way up along the left side. So any homes would be on the other side of those.
On the other side of that. Okay.
And I think, Karen, most of the homes are a little further north than where we're at.
No, there's some right in Byron. There's some.
Well, yeah, those are quite a ways away.
Okay, well, that's all I'm looking at because that's part of my community down here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Next. Did we get all the questions?
Yes, we did. Oh,
okay.
Mel just put his hand up.
All right.
Mel.
Real quick, I'm assuming each of these sites will be secure sites with gate and fencing.
Correct.
Do you have any idea what type of fencing, how high it might be, that type of thing as far as a visual impact?
Gwen, you actually, I don't know if you got to that level of detail in the document. I know that we talked about.
We talked about 8-foot fencing around the properties. In some properties, there would be more formal fencing, like around the pumping plant, and they'll have more security because people will be coming in and out of it all the time. The shafts post-construction will we'll have fencing around it with gates. We also would not have any lights that would be going towards the adjacent properties, etc. So lights like on those wouldn't occur if people had to do emergency work at night.
Just to follow up comment, as a member of an agency that has facilities in the Delta, you'll have to pay particular attention to security issues. And so, because the Delta is an interesting place at nighttime, and if you don't have a secure facility, significant damage can occur. So
right.
it's
And
just. Just my comment.
Warning, and we recognize that especially at places like the intakes and the pumping plants. The tunnel shafts will have secured lids on them that basically are so heavy they will need a crane to be removed. And so those will be of minimal issues there.
But all your parking structures, everything needs to be secure.
Yes.
Otherwise, they become essentially nuisance properties for activities that you don't want to have occur.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Gwen.
Philip actually just put up his hand as well. Philip, Marlo.
I'm not sure who's going to go first.
You go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so just kind of piggybacking off of what Mel brought up, you know, I for a fact that there is a lot of theft of, you know, boat-driven theft of private properties in the Delta, whether that is, you know, of copper wiring from, you know, irrigation pipes, et cetera, or of, you know, people's homes when people aren't home, because it is an easy place to have amphibious theft. I don't know if the SEC has, or not the SEC, or if the DCA has thought about this, but it might be wise to start planning, you know, what your collaboration systems will look like with local law enforcement. I don't know if that's something that's within the authority of the DCA, but I imagine that it would be helpful for local law enforcement. So like if you guys have security cameras, et cetera, you know, any sort of monitoring systems, that type of information can be really helpful for law enforcement agencies in Contra Costa and San Joaquin County.
Excellent. That's a good point.
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So Barbara, you have your hand up as well. Is it a clarifying question or is it more of a discussion?
Val, sorry, Cecilia Giacomo, she's been having her physical hand up. She can't seem to raise.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cecilia, I didn't see you.
Okay. I'm sorry, I can't access the function to raise my hand on the screen. My screen's not working very well.
Okay.
I have two questions and just a statement. There are a lot of roadway access thefts also in the Delta, not just boat. But that's a good point he made, that there's just plain a lot of theft in the nighttime hours, especially. My two questions are, what is the height of those two shafts? And what will you be hydro seeding with? What kind of seeds?
You know, I don't think we're at that level of specificity right now. You know, it's going to be something that's native to the area that grows and prevents runoff on those piles. So what that is, you know, we're not there yet. As for the height of the shafts, the height varies by location depending on the flood level at that location. So, you know, they could be as little as 10 feet out of the ground or upwards of 15 to 20.
Because they look flat at this point. Maybe because they're flat.
Each of them has a built-up pad around it to access the top of the shaft. So, you know, hopefully the renders help. I know sometimes it's hard to look at a drawing and understand what's going on. So,
all right. Thank you. And Barbara, you had a clarifying question.
Just to pile on a little bit, because now it kind of raises an issue we've never talked about. You know, there's no sheriff on duty in the southern end of the Delta from 9 at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. So the whole security issue around equipment and even safety during the day, I think you've got a lot of work to do with the sheriff departments. Just so you know.
Good luck.
Thanks. All right. Next topic. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Gwen Buchholz. She's going to cover the next two questions. The first is on water management, second one on air quality. So Gwen, take it away.
Okay. So one of the questions that was asked was how will we manage two parts of water quality? Where do we find the water during construction, post-construction? Where and how do we manage the runoff and dewatering flows off of the construction site? Next. So our goals on all of this was to avoid reductions in surface water and groundwater supplies and water quality of the adjacent supplies. So therefore, we want to maximize the use of on-site water supplies that occur due to the construction, which will also reduce the discharge of stormwater and minimize the need for other supplies. We will, and I'll talk about each one of these a little bit more in the next set of slides, which will mean that we limit the use of surface water use to historical diversions, groundwater use to historical regional use, and we'll maximize the use of recycled wastewater if we need additional waters off-site, and minimize the use of water from public water supplies. Next. Our major water demands on a construction site, we have, we show 7 items here. Every site, though, the two biggest ones are construction site dust control, and then, which is at the top of the list, and at the bottom of the list is the tire wash basins. We're anticipating tire wash basins at each exit locations for trucks and all other vehicles, including like pickups and sedans. And these tire wash basins do recycle their water, filter out the soil material, but they do have makeup water that go into them, and they can be they are a large water demand on every one of our sites. If we have large sites like Southern Forebay, we will have multiple exit locations. So we'll have tire wash basins at each one because we're here to protect the adjacent roadways and minimize soil and dirt accumulation on those that would re-entrain and cause other dust problems. Other major water demands at the launch sites especially is the water injected at the tunnel head to loosen up the soil. And so though that occurs only at the tunnel launch site, we also need a lot of water to make concrete. The potential water sources that we would use are, as I said, dewatering flows from excavations, but they only occur sporadically, such as we anticipate putting cutoff, we're already calling for cutoff walls around like all of an intake site to protect the adjacent groundwater during dewatering activities. So we'll only be dewatering a certain amount of flows within shaft locations or the intake sites. But when it does come, we want to be able to capture it, treat it, and reuse it. We anticipate for both the dewatering flows and the site runoff from storm events, we will have treatment plants on site of each of the facilities. And they were, what we use is they come on like tractor trailer trucks, like single haul trucks. And you can get up to like 2 million gallon a day treatment plants in the back of one of those single haul trucks. We will also have other single haul trucks that will be used to store water. So the dewatering flows or the runoff occurs at certain times, we'll be able to treat it and then store it on site for later use. With respect to the other water sources, the surface water diversions, we only have 5 or 6 sites that have surface water rights, and that's all we're looking at. We're not looking at putting in new intakes or acquiring new surface water rights. We would be just using those. We've reviewed all of their current surface water diversion history since 2008 that they've reported to the State Water Resources Control Board. We would never exceed the monthly amounts of water that they have historically used, because that to protect other surface water rights. The similar thing with groundwater wells. Again, we were not going to increase the groundwater diversions over the average groundwater use in the area. And as this goes forward, by the time this project is under construction, the Sigma teams will be fully implemented, and we would have to be consistent and compliant with whatever the Sigma requirements are for those areas. And as I site runoff for storm events, We would capture it and then pump it or move it to the treatment facilities, potentially, and store it as necessary. This would eliminate the need for increasing peak runoff in adjacent drainages. And it also provides treatment for all of the runoff. There will be times that the water will go through the treatment plant and still may need to be discharged, but this would reduce the peak runoff just like you would a detention basin or a subdivision. And then on many sites, we'll still need additional water. We're primarily use recycled wastewater from nearby wastewater treatment plants, such as wastewater coming in from, recycled water coming in from Sacramento Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, City of Lodi, and potentially City of Tracy by the time we're finished construction, because all of those projects have recycle programs and commercial, they're in place or planned commercial truck fill facilities. And then with Sacramento Regional, we certainly would be coordinating with them on their harvest water project. Next. Wanted to give you an example and sort of give you a relative feeling about how much, what the different water demands and water supplies look like. This is a smaller site. This happens to be the New Hope maintenance shaft on the Central Corridor. So you can see on the left-hand side, our largest water demand, and this is a total water demand. It's not, we actually did the water analysis by month over the time frame of the construction period. So there'll be times in which ground improvement will be needed, but many months that ground improvement would not be needed. But tire wash water will be needed throughout the entire construction period, as would dust control. On some of the sites, the larger ones will have dust control with irrigation sprinklers to avoid the need for a lot of water trucks. And in here, the green on the left is the tire wash water. The royal blue at the top right is the dust control. And you can see that we have other times when we're mixing our water with either mixing it for moisture compaction of the soils or mixing it with cementous material for ground improvement or cutoff walls. This site does not have any surface water rights, and we believe has minimal groundwater capabilities. So on the right-hand side of this graphic, you can see that the majority of our water supply, we're anticipating in purple, to be recycled water. And the orange area over the total construction period would be site runoff. As another example, let me go to the next one. This is a larger site. This happens to be the Byron Tract on the Southern Complex. It's a little different in the sense that first of all, it's a very large site. So we would have multiple locations for water collection and treatment and storage. Again, on the left-hand side, the water demands, the tire wash water is large, the green. Right above it is the dust control, which is sort of dark blue. But this one has, this project has 3 or basically 4 tunnel launch shafts, 3 tunnels. And so the tunneling operations, which are the light blue, they have a large water demand over the period of time, longer period of time. And the royal blue is we have 2 concrete batch plants at this location. The Byron Tract on the right side of this graphic shows our water supplies. The light blue is surface water rights. There are substantial surface water rights which have been historically diverted on that site. We also have surface water that we can acquire from the California Aqueduct and the State Water Project facilities and onto the site. So that's the surface water rights. We would capture all of the site runoff and that we can and treat all of it and maximize our use of it. And that's the orange. And then we have a small amount of dewatering flows in some areas during construction, but those are sporadic during the entire construction period. But in total, they are the site. So that's the end of what I have to say about water balance issues on the construction sites. Are there any questions?
And again, we're focusing more on clarifications. I see Cece has her hand up. You are still muted though, Cece. I'll just remind you about that. Cece, you're still muted. There you go. All right.
there are no numbers on those pie charts. Can you fill that in?
It's a difficult thing to say because we put the pie charts on for the entire construction period to just give you so that then total they add up to 100%. It's not and what you really have to look at is a month-to-month process, which is the kind of information that we would be providing to the EIR team. So I don't have the individual numbers month by month for each one of these at my fingertips. I have percentages what these represent, but those are a total over the construction period.
Okay, great. All right, Mel Lytle.
Yeah, thanks. I think that to be fair, it's very important that you provide some sort of estimates as to water usage, total acre feet, million gallons per day, whatever it might be. I think that that's only fair to ask for that type of information. Also, with your tunnel spoils, storage areas, there's going to be a stormwater impact there as well. And you need to make mention of how you're going to handle runoff from the spoils piles.
That's a very good point. And I was just focusing today on the construction, but on the areas that would have RTM storage, we would continue to have the detention basins and treatment facilities on there, and also something that would not increase the peak runoff. So again, all of the water would be treated on that and would be tested. Obviously, during construction, we're going to have a lot of people out there testing every day of the water and different water supplies. Post-construction, this will also have to be monitored, and we'll have a stormwater pollution prevention permit for each one of the site locations, even if they don't have RTM storage. So even if it's like a maintenance shaft, it would also still have a detention basin prior to discharge.
Of course. Yeah. As far as the spoils piles go, I mean, you're looking at potential for treatment in perpetuity.
Yes.
So that's something that has to be considered. Also, use of groundwater in the Delta is sometimes very prohibitive due to its quality. Not so much due to metals and other things, but due to salinity. And so your use of groundwater for any type of concrete or anything like that, you have to take into serious consideration because of the salinity issues in some of the areas of the Delta as far as groundwater is concerned.
And I appreciate that. We totally agree with you. We also know that when we get down to the southern part of the southern forebay and also in the South Delta Conveyance, we have a lot of boron issues that we saw State Water Project had to deal with in the construction of Banks Pumping Plant.
Yeah. There's some historic groundwater quality analysis that's been done by the USGS. I suggest that you may take a look at that because it was very thorough, and it might give you some aid as far as trying to understand the dynamics of water quality in groundwater underneath the Delta.
We agree, and we appreciate that comment. And we also recognize that the treatment facilities will be different at different locations, and they may be a different truck running one set of treatment versus one that has to for surface water runoff versus one that has to deal with the groundwater.
Yeah, and the salinity in the groundwater is something very difficult to treat.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And Gia, go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback off of the last gentleman's comments. In Hood, my concern was with the groundwater as well. We have a really bad water situation. We just got a water treatment plant for the first time in my life. And so my concern is with you're taking so much water, considering that we're right in between intakes 3 and 5, how that's going to affect our water and what is going to be done if there are problems with it, and with our town being able to get the water that we need while the water for the project is being taken.
Good questions. And I didn't include an example. I always try to wonder how many examples I should use. An example for the intakes. Each of the intakes have some surface water rights. We anticipate, though, that there would be a lot of recycled water backing up those water supplies from the Sac Regional project.
And then if you're bringing in water for that, how is that traffic of those vehicles going to affect or compound the traffic of the already existing materials and employees coming through?
We've included those truck trips in the numbers that we are providing to the EIR for their traffic considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Gia. Anna.
Thank you. So a big topic in the Delta, of course, is SGMA. And so that's the Sustainability Groundwater Management Act. And so the idea of using groundwater for this project, when all of the momentum, including the creation of public agencies and writing multi-million-dollar plans and all of these things that are like literally rolling out as we speak, I don't think have projected or included any type of participation with this project. And when the whole goal of SGMA is for us to reduce the reliance on groundwater to refresh the aquifers in the areas, you know, the area out to the east of the Delta has a cone of depression that totally needs to be dealt with. And so the idea that that you guys are going to rely on groundwater and further deplete the already impacted aquifers that farmers rely on to irrigate their crops is very troubling to me. And then the other question I had is the recycled water. Is this a contract that you guys have already created with the utility, or is this a hope that you guys have? It's kind of troubling, the idea of creating this system and then having water that the intention of the Harvest Water Project is, again, to decrease the reliance by local agricultural operations on groundwater. And if that instead is going to be diverted and sent for this project, it totally undermines the whole purpose and the whole way that the project was intended. And so those are my two questions. How are you going to get past SGMA? And then what is the situation with the recycle? Is this a hope of your guys, or have you actually spoken with the utility and this is a ongoing, almost contracted type of arrangement that you've made? Thank you.
Okay, so let me take the first one. We totally recognize SGMA and the issues, and that's why we have not relied upon groundwater in a major way at any of the sites. It's it would have to, I've gone through what is publicly available on the SGMA for each of the sites right now, and I know that by the time we're looking at construction, those programs will be up and running, and they will be very, very regulated, because they need to meet their goals by the 2030s and also by 2042. So we can only look at working within them and looking at potential groundwater that was used on these sites prior to acquisition. And again, and if that historical use was higher than what would be allowed in SGMA, we recognize it would only be what was allowed in SGMA. Totally, we cannot just come in and change that. So because of that, in my experience, I would not totally rely on groundwater. The worth with recycling, we're read about the Harvest Water, including their latest initial study, mitigated negative declaration. They have about 50,000 acre feet of water that they have looked at for provisions to those areas east of the Interstate 5. And we would have to, that would be, as it's already been analyzed in 2 environmental documents, that would already probably become part of the baseline situation, so that those areas certainly already have commitments associated with them. We would be working, we have not sat down with SAC Regional yet, Sacramento Regional Wastewater Management Agency or District yet to discuss this. But overall, there appears to be adequate water supplies for the construction. And again, all of this doesn't occur at one time. We've got a water balance that goes month by month over the entire construction period over each key feature. So
I appreciate that. But remember that Sigma is not supposed to maintain historic use. It's supposed to create a reduction, right? Exactly. And the thing about the Harvest Water Project is that that water, the 50,000 acre feet, is delegated completely to the farmers, and then for the ecological benefits. Yes. There's not supposed to be anything left over. And so, you know, one of my ongoing issues with this project is that there's a lot of assumptions made. And so that is an assumption that is wrong. There's no leftover water for this project. And the idea of you guys even contemplating the use of groundwater for this project will absolutely not work. Sigma requires us to reduce our reliance. And so you cannot go by a historic, please don't interrupt me. You cannot go by a historic baseline. You have to look at what the reduction would be, and then you'd have to see if there's any type of a balance in that. And so I really encourage you to look at that. Thank you so much.
So Gwen, two clarifying elements. One, the project is going to follow statutory requirements, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if it related to the question that was just posed, it will follow statutory requirements. The other element is, because we're talking about water, I think that there's a concern that the project could be using a lot of water. And especially since we're just talking in terms of the graphs that you're showing are more relative, you know, showing percentages. Mm-hmm. Is there going to be a lot of water used to move this forward in construction?
There will be substantial amounts of water, depending on the site.
Okay, okay. But again, it'll be a balance between the groundwater and, yes?
Surface water, right, site runoff. We recognize that groundwater is not a major water supply. That, and we will be relying upon, during the winter time, we will have site runoff. We've been using historical rainfall for those assumptions, with the lower end of that as the drier years. But we would be relying a lot upon recycled water. And even if we couldn't get water through harvest water in the pipelines, we would then, right now, what we've given to the EIR team includes trucking the recycled water into the area.
Yeah, Gwen, just for clarification, you know, the concrete batch plants and the tunneling operations, the things that need these continuous amounts of water, do not need significant amounts of water. Dust control, you know, you'll fill the truck up. A lot of that can come from site runoff. So they're not significant sources or water demands at these sites. It's just that there's going to need to, in some cases, be an alternative water supply when there's not enough runoff on site to treat and service. So I just want to be clear that these are not significant water demand sites here during construction.
Okay, Douglas, Mike, Jim Wallace, Lindsay Liebig, and then Mel Lytle. So Douglas?
Hi, okay. Yeah, I just have a question about the dust control. Well, do you have a standard scale to measure the balance between the optimal use of water and the control of dust? I mean, do you have such a standard so that you can kind of like control from time to time depending on the source availability of the water?
Not sure I totally understand the question. We've used the water demands we used were from similar construction activities. We anticipate In the smaller areas like access roads, you'd use a water truck to spray it down. In the larger facilities,
do you have a scientific standard to measure?
No, we don't have a scientific standard in that sense. We do have a standard to meet from the air resources, the air management control boards of how much of not allowing dust to leave the site.
Okay, so there is a standard to monitor the amount of dust.
Yes, so it's not to leave the site.
And that is, okay, thank you.
That's a regulation.
Is it like how much dust per cubic feet or something?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I apologize.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to just kind of be mindful of time for the moment. It's 3:55. So I just want to be clear that we do have a lot to move forward. We do still have some clarifying questions. Mike Moran.
Thanks, Gwen. This is wonderful information. Thank you. It looks like we're kind of getting toward this, but if when those numbers do come out, the total water used, if we can just have some kind of a relative or comparison with what the water is, with the inflow into the Delta, just some kind of a percentage of use. So that not significant amount that Catherine was speaking of, if we can figure that out through the seasons as well. I figure that the water use will probably be pretty consistent for the project itself, but the water flowing through the Delta may not be so. And then the question I had to go along with that is, how was historical use determined? Is it going to, was that over an average of different years, or how was that determined?
So the surface water rights diversions, and we only have surface water right diversions at the intakes, Byron Tract, Bacon Island, and Bolden. No other surface water rights diversions occur on the properties that we're looking at. Since about 2008, 2009, all surface water rights diverters have had to submit their diversion amounts to the State Water Resources Control Board. And we pulled those down for each of the water rights associated with each of those properties. So we could understand the variability like in a range of Januaries. You can see differences in that type of thing.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Mike. Jim Wallace.
All right, thanks. Hey, Gwen, what I'm interested in is the site runoff number pie there.
Mm-hmm.
You get about 20% or so of potential water supplies. So that means you've got to collect the water at each site, and memory serves, I don't remember seeing any kind of structures like that on any previous drawings, engineered drawings about temporary dams, berms, anything like that around these sites that collect site runoff, particularly if you're talking about meteoric water, you're talking about rainfall.
Right.
Because you're not talking about tailwater, right, from construction. No. So
well, and that'll be included in there, but no, these are the sites, and we've added that to recent drawings that we've provided to the EIR team.
Okay, so but not to us yet.
No, they haven't been on the books.
I was just trying to remember if we.
No, they were not. We just added them in the last week or so.
All right, Lindsay Liebig.
Yeah, definitely the Harvest Water Project is a little bit of concern just because we've been working since that was even proposed for WISP funding to use that for agriculture. So to have that, 50,000 acre feet, I mean, we have more farmers on other areas that want that water. So the competition for that is something, area of concern that definitely we would look into. So seeing numbers and potentially what the acre feet, usage would be in things, because we have farmers getting into contracts, getting into long-term contracts with regional SAN in order to guarantee this water. So I'd want to see some numbers and things and projections on, what would be used for certain areas, in those things. And then additionally, yes, Sigma is, still fluid right now, but GSPs are in the process of being developed for this entire basin. And so I would, encourage you to attend some of those meetings and look at, where things are at, and at least request some updated documents and you know, rates and things, because there are a lot of decisions that are getting made right now that could help kind of further your you know, discussion along, because there are things, especially in the Delta, that are getting decided within the South American basin for the northern part of this project that you could identify right now with Sigma and what those requirements and things will be. So if you need to know who to talk to with that, I can definitely point you in the right direction, because I'm involved in those GSP development discussions. But there is some information that's more than just what's been public put out through DWR on where specific Sigma GSP plans will be, instead of waiting until the drafts are released in you know, early 22.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, two more, Mel Lytle and Barbara Bergen-Priya. So Mel?
Couple points of information for you. As far as GSPs are concerned, the Eastern San Joaquin Subbasin's GSP was submitted to the state back in January. Excuse me. Also, the Tracy Subbasin GSP is under current development. If you want a point of contact, contact Matt Zadar, San Joaquin County Public Works.
Okay, I know Matt.
Also, I mentioned the USGS publication. I have it. It's called the California Gamma Program, Groundwater Quality Data in the Northern San Joaquin Basin Study Unit,
Okay.
published in 2005.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. And Barbara Bergen-Priya.
Just real quick, I actually think Mike Moran covered it. Numbers when we can have them, because you don't know what you're tracking if you don't measure it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, it's 4:01. Next slide.
I just want to remind us, we got 11 points. We're on slide 4, so just keep that in mind.
I'm going to go through this rapidly.
Again, keep it just clarifying comments. That's it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to wear anyone out yet.
Okay, air quality. We're asked to provide a little more information. This is a process in which we provide, next slide, please. Thank you. Where we provide information to the environmental impact report team, and they do the analysis using the models that are established by the California Air Resources Board and US EPA and others. We have pulled together and we provide this information to the EIR team. One of the things, and I know this has been talked about at other SECs, is we did a detailed, our work includes a detailed analysis and schedule of all the different types of equipment that would be used at each one of the construction sites and the hours that they would be used, electric equipment, non-electric equipment, and employees. We went through each type of equipment to determine and find and pull specification sheets to confirm that if electric versions of this equipment would be used, we included that in the electric equipment. In the non-electric equipment, or basically diesel, we also confirmed where we can commercially available Tier 4 diesel engines. We used the currently available information for two reasons. One is, on other projects that I've worked on, we have been received comments that we were being too optimistic by saying electric equipment would definitely be available. So it might come in as mitigation measures. I don't know how the EIR will handle that, but for what we can provide them as the engineers, we provided what's currently available. The other thing is that California Air Resources Board has quite the specific process of allowing for the use of some types of equipment that aren't currently available. If they're currently available, they allow us to put that in the air quality models as electric or Tier 4 diesel engines. But if they haven't approved them or it's not commercially available, they won't necessarily let them be included in the modeling that the EIR team would be used. So we did, as I said, created a list for each one of the tasks on how many hours and a time frame, a month's time frame, and we across the construction schedule for each facility. Most of the non-electric equipment included like things like excavators and a lot of the earthwork equipment on site. And the truck trips that you've previously seen included the trucks to get this equipment to the site. When we get to the EIR team, they'll use the models to quantify emissions, and they'll compare that to background air quality and threshold values. And if necessary, the EIR team will be developing mitigation measures, which in the past have ranged from alternative fuels, like moving to electric, minimizing vehicle miles, even on site, vehicle retrofits, and even potentially purchase of offset. The graphic at the bottom on the right was just as an example of something that's come from a similar project. This has nothing, these aren't numbers for this project or alternatives for this project. The one thing I wanted to point out is that we did, then we also included the electric equipment, because the electric equipment, like the tunnel boring machines, those things have to also be analyzed by the EIR team for greenhouse gas emission rates in the region based upon electricity generation. Next slide. We just, for the 6,000 CFS option for Central and Eastern Corridor, this is just a total operating hours over the entire construction period at each of these sites. It really varies by month. So any one month won't look like this distribution, I will guarantee you that. But in total, it basically shows that most of the construction use for especially these non-electric earthwork materials are down at Southern Complex on Byron Track, because we're using them to form the embankments for the Southern Forebay. We're using them to move RTM around from the launch shafts. We're using them to raise the tunnel shaft pads. So that has a lot of and there's also, they have 2 batch plants down at the Southern Complex. The next largest amount of, oh, you go back 1, 2, please, real quickly. I'm trying to hurry. The intakes are the next largest group, because they have a lot of earthwork moving around in the highway, back and forth, and doing the sedimentation basin excavation. And then the next are the two launch sites for each of the corridors, Twin Cities and Bolden for Central, and Twin Cities and Lower Roberts for East. That is the completion of this. And again, this analysis will be done through the EIR, not through the DCA.
Got it. Okay, so we have a couple hands up, a couple just quick clarifications on my part. Again, the project, the construction will follow statutory requirements, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the CARB has issued directives, and the project will follow those directives as well, correct?
They will be following part of the CARB regulations, and the modeling has to be done in accordance with them.
And just again, as you just said, this is going to be handled in depth in the CEQA analysis in the environmental document. This right here is just a high level discussion and explanation of the modeling and not a definitive plan. You're just answering the question that was posed related to air quality during construction, correct?
Right, and it's not even the modeling. This actually becomes hours of non-electric equipment use, and it's used as an input to the models that the EIR team will be operating.
And so with that, we have a couple hands up. Gia?
I was just wondering if there's been any kind of analysis or studies done on the wind erosion in those construction sites, especially where there's bare soil. Just because we are known for our infamous Delta breeze, and all of that dirt and stuff is going to, I'm assuming, will kick up. So I was just wondering about that.
Yes, there's incredible equations that go with that. And we've been working with the EIR modeling team, and they have to know on all of our stockpiles, whether it's topsoil or RTM, how tall they are, what the areas are, what location, where they will be developing the windrows direction issues for each one of those. And they have to have, for everything we use, we have to give them a coordinate so they can put it in the model.
Great. And Barbara Berrigan-Perea.
When it comes to offset purchases, can we advocate that purchases are made to benefit the impacted communities? We had a problem with the last EIR on water fix where offsets were going to be purchased for somewhere else in the world. So kind of an environmental justice principle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next slide.
All right, so we're going to move. Thanks, Gwen. Phil is going to pick up the next two questions dealing with the intakes and power corridors. So Phil.
Okay, so the question was to identify noise and traffic levels for the at the construction sites, post-construction sites. Okay, so go ahead. The intakes themselves, you know, they're gravity flow, so there's not a lot of motors or any of these things, so they just don't naturally make a lot of noise. So it's the people working there that would potentially make any noise during operations. There's a certain amount of noise going around with some screen cleaning operations. That's just typical crew work, nothing of consequence. The biggest issue at the intakes is the annual removal of sediment. So the sediment basins there would collect the sediment, and then we would dredge it out of those basins using a floating dredge and pump it into the sediment drying basins in a rotating pattern that I won't get into the details, where the flow goes in there with it's a slurry, you decant the water off, you dry it out, and then you scoop it out of there, and you're rotating through that. Each one of these basins is in a different part of the process to keep you continuously operating. Scoop it out, and then you'd haul it away. So let's go to the next slide and kind of the solids pumped from the basins would be dried once a year during the summer, and we'll talk about exactly what's going on. But it's essentially 2.5 to 5 months, 10 to 20 weeks a year to dry it and haul it off, and that's going to depend on a lot of things associated with the how much sediment is in the river and how much water we divert. So obviously, if there's not a lot of sediment in the river and we don't divert a lot of water, then you'd get a lot less sediment that you'd collect. But if the river was really chock full of you know, sand and silt, and we diverted, you know, a lot of water, then we'd get a lot more. And so the upshot here is right now we don't have actual operating data to predict on a statistical basis how the DWR would divert water through these things. So I can only kind of speculate on sort of low, moderate, and high situations as to what might happen. So if you look on the right there, in a low solids year would be a year where it's a, you know, drier year, so the project isn't diverting as much water as it normally would be. And also in a drier year, you would expect to have not so much flow in the river. So there's not as many flows to stir up sediment, so there's not as much sediment in the river. So in those cases, you know, some of these drier years, and it's just based on a set of assumptions right now, but it's kind of a lower end of the scale. You'd have about 2 truck trips per hour, this is for both intakes, for about 2.5 months. So, you know, it's basically 1 an hour out of each intake for, and that's only during 5 day a week, 10-hour a day work days. So not much, barely noticeable. And then if we go up to a year where, you know, we still use the moderate level of sediment in the river, you know, the amount that you would, you know, there'd be as many times it'd be higher as would be lower in the river. And you take a more modest look at how much, you know, maybe the diversions are quite a bit higher, but the sediment concentrations are still not that high. You can see that it doesn't get that bad. It's up in the 3.5 trucks per hour for both intakes, even with a fair amount of diversion. Where it really kicks in is when you get in those years where this one at the bottom represents the sediment in there is 95% of the time it's less than that. So this is a really, you know, only 5% of the time is it ever higher than that, and with a large diversion year. So this is kind of near the upper bound of what would happen in, you know, a wetter year with a lot of water stirring up the sediment, and the state is able to take a lot more water. And that's when you turn into needing the full 5 months and the, you know, as many as 10 trucks per hour for the 2 intakes. So these are kind of, they bracket where we might fall. You shouldn't see the higher ones very often, and you probably won't see the very lower ones very often, but you always fall somewhere in between. But I would say you're going to fall more towards the moderate ones. Okay.
Did you talk about noise too?
Well, I mentioned that there's, yeah, so the noise associated with it, the dredge we expect to be mostly electric. So they don't make a ton of noise. The noise you would hear is the machinery. We have to kind of plow these solids to get them to dry in a quick period of time. So it's basically an agricultural vehicle in the floor of the basin. That's not, we try not to make them very deep. So it's a tractor running around, probably not that much different than the tractors that are already running around part of the area. And then there'll be loaders to load it onto trucks, and trucks coming in and out. And again, it's during the workday, so we don't expect it to be, you know, particularly noisy. And then, you know, now and then there might be some work on the deck of the intakes, but again, there's nothing like big engines running on a regular basis. There's no driving of piles like the, you know, things you're going to see during construction.
Thanks.
Questions? Okay. Hearing none, we can move to
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So the work on I-5 recently has actually been more of an impact to the communities of the Delta, and for communities such as Elk Grove, which is very nearby the project. And so there was no analysis done, of course, when they started the preparations for the I-5 construction, but nonetheless, it has impacted us with noise. And so I worry because that's on a very much smaller scale than this project. And so again, I brought this up before. I think that the acoustics in the Delta need to be considered, you know, locally on a regional basis, not on a modeling or a statistical basis. I think that the way that the noise carries here is much different. And as somebody who lives in a Delta community, I can tell you that when they are harvesting, we are all very aware that there's machinery running. And so, and that again is on a parcel by parcel basis, not on the size and scale of this project. And so I really hope that you're not downplaying the idea that it would just be the same as what's happening locally, because it would be what is happening locally compounded with the construction noise on top of that, which makes conditions here possibly unbearable. And so I would like consideration of a cumulative noise level or you know, noise impact on the communities, not just the project itself, because we already have background noise that's seasonal with the harvest. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. No other questions?
Nope.
I think David Welch has
I had a
hand
question.
up in the,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't find that wave button, but my question is on, you're talking 2 to 10, 12, 2 to 10 trucks per hour.
yes.
The conditions of our roads right now are horrible. Is there any
They would come off our
plans on redoing the roads?
Well, they would come off, that traffic would be on the.
That would be on
dedicated
your haul roads?
Yeah, and so they would come out
Okay.
either onto Lambert or to Hood Franklin. But again, the traffic analysis we've shown, both those are relatively low travel. And I mean, for a few trucks like this, it shouldn't be we can do that traffic analysis, but it shouldn't be a major.
And then the noise level, you're talking about the equipment you guys are going to be using are going to have backup alarms. So that noise alone, and I'm telling you, because we have a water purification plant going in here in the town of Hood, and the county has not been able to work until like 8 o'clock in the morning, between 8 and 4, because of that backup noise on that equipment is so loud and obnoxious that we've had a lot of complaints. So I would ask you guys to just check that out as well. Getting close to town. That's all I had.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief Welsh. Gia.
So I just had a question about things like the when you're hauling them the RTM away or whatever, about things that are coming off of it, like toxins. Is there going to be like an odor? These are just questions considering that a lot of it's going to be surrounding Hood on both sides.
So this is mainly sand. It's the larger settleable particles that are flowing in the river. We don't anticipate quality issues, but that will be tested, and I think there's efforts underway to potentially try and quantify that better as part of the EIR.
Okay, yeah, just because sometimes when, I don't know if you've ever played in the river, but sometimes when you dig things out of there, it stinks.
Yeah, it's mainly from the organic parts of it. So yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be, it's not like we're gonna leave it sit for a long time we'll try and bake it in the sun to dry it out as fast as possible. I don't really know what to say. We haven't modeled odors from it. Now the Freeport does this down at their intake, and they're right in the middle of the town. They haven't had any odor issues on theirs. And it should be similar sediment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and we are, I believe the project is trying to do more noise monitoring, is that correct?
Oh, hey Val, yeah, this is Carrie. So one of the things, Anna, you had mentioned something about sort of understanding local noise conditions, and we have been looking at trying to do additional noise monitoring. We do need willing hosts for the noise monitoring equipment though. So we'll probably follow up with an email to the SEC if you guys are willing to host noise monitors, or someone who is. We'd love to put more monitoring equipment out there to get a better understanding of baseline noise conditions.
Terrific. Anna, I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you. As far as the smell at Freeport, if you've ever taken a boat by that intake, there is a smell. You can smell it from the houses that are directly across from the intake. And so I think it would be a good idea to revisit that, because again, that's a much smaller intake than what is being proposed. And so the smell would probably be 10 times worse, since this intake is 10 times bigger. And I appreciate the invite for the noise monitors, and I will look for that email. Thank you.
Anna, thanks for raising that. Actually, Nasli, excuse me, does it make sense to send out an email after the meeting with a little more detail on the noise monitors so that the SEC perhaps could help with what Carrie raised earlier?
Yeah, no, I'd be more than happy to, and appreciate it. Carrie, I'll touch base.
Yeah, I'll send some more information about sort of what is entailed and what we're looking for. And so, like what it means to have a noise monitor. And so we'll get that to Nasli to distribute to the SEC.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Right on. Perfect. All right. No other questions. Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, the other one, next question is about the total power requirements at the sites, and how will power be brought to these sites, and will any renewable energy be built as part of the project? So the renewable energy question is part of the EIR. DCA is not evaluating that. So that'll have to come in future. But I can tell you what our estimated power loads are, which are shown here. In KVA, it's similar to kilowatts. The numbers are very close at some geeky engineering detail depending on the power factor. But Anyway, so you can see the loads there, and these slides are available, so you can come back to them. I'm not sure they mean a lot to a lot of people. The 62,000 at a launch site is a pretty big number. You can see that the Southern Complex, during permanent, running that big pump station is 122,000. Most of them during the permanent load is relatively low. The intakes have a little bit higher load because of things like dredges. And South Delta conveyance facilities have a little bit bigger load, mainly to account for potential dewatering. So they have this is for a connected load. It's not necessarily operating all the time. The shafts themselves, very low loads for, monitoring equipment and that kind of thing. So anyway, let's move on. How are we going to get there? So
And apparently, Phil, a lot of security cameras.
And those unfortunately are low load as well, but yes. Actually, there is a fair amount of security accounted for by the state. So
yep,
there will definitely be security at these sites. So how will the power get there? So this is, right now what we have is a proposal of, a reasonable approach to this to include in the EIR. You got to recognize that these things are continually negotiated and developed with the various power companies. So like you see here in the north, this is mostly SMUD in the north. So these are concepts that we're working with them on, and they're what we have right now. So the concept for the intakes in the Twin Cities launch site is the main power supply would be at the Franklin substation. There's an existing power line down Franklin that we would add some arms to and run the power line down to Lambert, where we would go underground. There'd be some switches and stuff at that location, underground to Twin Cities, and then down Lambert and up our haul roads to the intakes. And at places where there's a branch, there's small switch yards. So, and then you can see at the shafts, so, well, stay up there. The shafts along the central alignment, you notice there's no green dots. That's because the power is, for all practical purposes, right on the site. So it's basically just a drop from the poles along the road to the sites. The ones on the eastern alignment are a little ways away from where the power line is. So there's a small underground power drive. There's a power drop off the pole, go through a little metering box, and then over to the site where it will be connected to the on-site electrical facilities. So as you move down into the central portion of the line, so next one, please, Jasmine. Okay, so this is the middle of the Eastern Central. So let's talk about the piece for Bolden Island. You can see that for that big green line that cuts across for Bolden Island is only for Bolden Island. It's not for the eastern one. So that little itty bitty square next to Terminus is all we have for the eastern route. But basically for Bolden, it's a large launch shaft site. So a new substation would connect to the PG&E power line that parallels the freeway there, run underground in the enhancements to Highway 12 and the new haul roads down to the Bolden Island launch site. Similarly, down at Lower Roberts on the lower right of the figure, you can see that, again, it's a connection to, I think, PG&E and WAPA are down there. So I'm not exactly sure who we're connecting to, but assumedly you connect to PG&E there with a substation, and then underground in our access roads to our RTM management site and over to the launch site. And then all of the shafts include small underground lines in access roads to access the shaft sites. And those are all like lower power demands. Okay, and then the next one, please. When you get down to the southern end, one of the things that is of note here is the underground stuff is, it obviously has no effects on like sandhill cranes and things like that. But we get down to in the far south, there's not as many of the protected bird species down there. So there's more overhead down here. Plus, these are bigger lines that have to come in. These are 115 kV lines that have to feed the southern forebay. So, and we needed dual feed for dependability of the project. So what you see coming in from the upper left, coming down at an angle in orange there, is a new pole line, 115 kV, coming from PG&E's Brentwood substation and angling its way down into the substation on site. And you see the green lines on site, that's for routing to our various loads on site underground. Then on the right side, you see coming up, that's down at the bottom there is the Wapa Tracy substation. So again, that would be a new 15 kV line that's coming up to the southern forebay. So these are above ground lines, they're big lattice towers. The places where it's purple is it's directly parallel right along another one. And the places where it's orange would be either a new one or it's going to be parallel to a, you know, like the diagonal is parallel to an existing power line, but it's not as big a power line as this, so we didn't think it was really fair to say it was parallel to the corridor. So because these are going to be the larger lattice towers. And then there's the drop at the very bottom to the South Delta outlet and control structure, which is a simple overhead drop from a power line that essentially already exists there. Yeah, I think that's the end of power. So is there any questions on power?
No hands are up. Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, we switch to Neil now, assuming he's.
I'm sorry, can Mike Moran just jump a question there on power?
Oh, hey, Mike.
Sorry about that. I'll go real quick. Right. Hey, just regarding that, especially that southern area, to give a lot of early consideration to migratory bird species, tricolor blackbirds, and also the raptor use up in there. The Altamont wind resource area has a lot of studies on flatland use of those by those birds. I'm not sure what kind of scale we're talking about with some of these power towers, but just to keep that in consideration, please.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so we have Neil Painter who leads the logistics group, and he's gonna hit two of the questions dealing with the train traffic, loads, and emergency response.
I'll also note that it's 4:32, Neil.
Yeah, I'm intending to be fairly brief in the interest of time. So thank you, Catherine and Valerie. Yeah, so question 7 relates to air quality issues associated with train idling that's been reported in South Stockton. And the question was focused on what would the DCA contribution be to that. So next slide, please. Okay, so the simple matter is that we do not have access to train idling data in South Stockton. And the reason for that is that it's a commercial facility. So what we do know is that BNSF Stockton operates around 20 freight services per day, and that there are also around 8 Amtrak trains per day that go through that, that particular facility. The DCA would be contributing around 2 deliveries per week to the Lower Roberts Island site. So the trains would be carrying things like precast concrete tunnel liners, bulk materials for making concrete on site. In addition to that, there would be around 2 trains per day going to the Southern Complex site, again carrying liners, but this time carrying RTM material in addition to bulk materials. The way that the rail operation will work is that the trains coming off the main line will pull into a site spur. They'll drop off around 20 to 40 rail cars, depending on the quantity of project materials that are being carried. And then the loco will actually depart after the drop off. So there's minimal idling associated with that activity. What will then happen is that there will be a DCA contractor managed on-site rail operator, and they will do effectively the shunting of those rail cars within the site. So again, minimal additional train loads to the numbers that are already passing through Stockton, and minimal anticipated train idling. That's it for this particular slide, for that particular presentation. So any questions on train
I have
idling?
no hands up. Go ahead.
Perfect. I'm going to barrel on in that case. So next one, this is in relation to the emergency response plan. So there was interest from the SEC about how emergency services will be provided during construction. And obviously, you know, we're talking about a major construction activity planned for the Delta over several years. And we're very mindful of the fact that the existing emergency services capability is geared towards the current communities. And so we need to take into account what our impact would be. So that's what I just mentioned is really relating to that top box there. So it's about coordinating a response with the existing agencies so that we're providing for the safety of those working on the construction project and during operations for that matter, but without compromising the coverage for the community. So there's really two parts to this. So we've developed a draft emergency response plan, and we recognise that we need to satisfy CalOSHA and federal tunnelling requirements. We also need to allow for the general civil construction requirements for construction activities in the state of California. And during the operations phase, the completed facilities will have to conform with DWR's amended emergency action plan requirements. So what's the project aiming to do to actually work with the situation? So what we've done, we went through an outreach process to gauge, and Chief Welch was one of the fire chiefs contacted. So we went out to the community, to the emergency response agencies to gauge what the local capabilities currently are. We then started looking at opportunities to enhance emergency response, and that can be done through several means. At some of the critical sites, we will construct on-site facilities where, in particular in relation to the CalOSHA tunneling requirements, there's a requirement that emergency response has to be no more than 30 minutes from the point of entry. So when you start looking at the geography of the Delta and the road network, it's difficult for a nearby emergency services agency within the same county to respond. So we would then look at establishing our own facilities on site, which would only exist during the course of construction. Another option that we've looked at is to either augment or expand local facilities. So that could be, it could look like building an extension onto a fire station. It could look like providing equipment. It could look like funding for a dedicated crew that would be housed at the facility but dedicated to respond to the needs of the project, and training as well. And that leads into the final point there. So, as with many aspects of this project, we're keen to leave a legacy after the peak of construction activity. So the equipment that would be provided to support construction would be left to the community. And of course, there is an ongoing benefit from the training that would occur. Next slide, please, Jasmine. So this one, I alluded to the outreach process before. I'm not wanting to get into this in too much detail, but it's just to give you a flavour for what we did. So we went through a mapping exercise. We identified in relation to the corridors, the eastern and central corridors, you can see there, which were the nearest fire protection districts or fire departments to each of the key facilities, and our facilities are shown there as the open circles. We then contacted the agencies and had received responses from many of them, and we've taken that into account in developing the plan. Now, the plan we have is a plan for a plan. I mean, it's recognizing that there is a need, but we don't have the detail yet, and there's a lot more coordination, consultation necessary before anything could be implemented. And I think that's the last slide.
All right, and Anna has her hand up. Go ahead, Anna.
Thank you. So I'm looking at this slide. Could you please elaborate a little better and tell us what CS03 would mean, or WFD02? what are these, what are the pink dots, and what is that supposed to show us? There's not a legend, so I'm having a hard time
Okay.
orienting myself.
So
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bethany. If you refer to the table to the left, let's pick on Cortland because Chief Welch is on the line. So Cortland is given the nomenclature CRT. So if you look then up towards the top of the screen, we've got CRT 01 and CRT 02. So they're the two fire stations that are in Cortland.
Okay, and again, this is not the actual plan. This is the intent, the thought behind the plan, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Karen Mann.
Okay, thank you for taking my question. I live down in the eastern Contra Costa County area, so that would be ECC 02 and ECC 05. And I'm sure that you're aware that we have 3 fire stations that handle about 250,000 people. And so the ECC 05 would leave 15,000 people without a fire station if or emergency access, and CCC 02 is about 25 minutes away from Discovery Bay. Is there any way that we can look at having another fire station put into that location? Because we know that the South Bay is, that there's something that's going to happen in the South Bay, and putting the rest of us residents who pay our property taxes for our emergency coverage at risk, I think is not a good idea.
So thank you, Karen. But I mentioned earlier that we're actually acutely aware of that. Our plan is not to compromise the existing coverage. So we're recognizing that that the construction activity will place a high demand on emergency services. We've just got to figure out where they come from. So in cases like that, we'd be looking at a combination of support from East Contra Costa Fire Protection District, for example, but we also recognise that at the Southern Complex, it's a very complicated construction site, and a lot of construction contractors potentially operating there at one time. So that's a location where we would consider establishing our own independent fire and emergency EMS team.
Yeah, as you should. Yeah, and probably the closest one to that Clifton Forebay area is not Tracy, it would be Mountain House.
Yes, yeah, that's right. This is an older map. This actually doesn't take into account the Bethany alternative, but we have looked at Mountain House for the Bethany alternative.
But they only have one fire station, so then they would be, you know, it's tough.
Yes, yes, they only have one fire station from memory. It only serves about 7 square miles. It's basically established for purely for the Mountain House development. But in fact, the Bethany complex and the Bethany outfall actually fall within Alameda County. So Mountain House would not be the priority fire station that we would call upon. This is all you know, material that we're still developing. But my intention today was just to give you an idea that we are thinking about provision of emergency services. We are thinking about protecting the coverage for the community.
So I think Alameda County, you bring up a compelling point, because yes, you do have kind of the 3 corners there. So we would not be using Alameda County services because their closest service is Livermore. Is that correct?
Yes, Livermore is the closest.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Karen, I just want to point out, I think what we've heard loud and clear is that this project, there's a desire to create synergy between the needs of the project and what exists in the local community. And I think in his first slide, he pointed that out. That's definitely a theme moving forward.
Okay, just looking out for my peeps.
You should be. Good job.
All right, and Cece has her hand up. Cece. Are you muted, Cece? I think you are.
I am. You're showing River Delta Fire and Ileton Fire, but you don't have Rio Vista Fire Department, and they are the primary parent department that supports those two volunteer districts, which are spread very thin. You need Rio Vista Fire Department on this map also.
Okay, we'll have a look at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Cece. All right, we have three more, Douglas, Mel, and Mike Moran. Douglas Shea.
Okay, the Water Grove Fire Department, most of the firemen are volunteers. So are you going to give them special training so that they can take care of the incidents in the area, in your facility?
Yes, that would be the plan, Douglas. So we would look at the particular types of construction activity that were occurring close to an individual fire station, for example. Some fire stations already have, for example, water rescue capability. So that might be of more interest to us, depending on which facility we're talking about. So we might look to augment their capacity and provide additional equipment and training to support our needs.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Mel Lytle.
Just question whether or not, doesn't look like City of Stockton Fire Department is on this map. Just wondered if you had contacted them. If not, I can probably be a contact, at least to get you in touch with them. Also, I'm seeing this as part of the issue, emergency response to the location. What about transport to and from local hospitals, things of that nature based on emergency issues?
Sure, good question. So in addition to fire departments and EMS, which is probably the most critical need, we've also looked at proximity of law enforcement and medical facilities. And with medical facilities, we've looked at those that have identified those that have trauma units, those that have, for example, ability to receive helicopter casualties.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Mel. And Mike Moran.
This is great, Neil. Thanks so much. On the previous slide, it says the project would aim to augment or expand existing local emergency response agency facilities. So we're talking about facilities and a legacy of equipment and training. Staffing? It seems there are fire stations that aren't staffed that are in existence right now, and that seems to be the biggest hurdle as far as public safety goes, fire safety out there. Is there any discussion on staffing or cooperative use between staffs for emergencies or anything like that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That falls into the broad category of the consultation that would need to be undertaken going forward. But we are aware that there are some fire stations particularly the South Delta, that have been closed. The fire departments have maintained ownership, and the facility is sitting there ready for use. We would just need to have a look at it from the point of view of travel distance to the nearest construction site. If it was within a reasonable distance to satisfy the regulations and so forth, then we could certainly look at recommissioning in cooperation with the fire department, recommissioning those facilities, and then providing the resources and the training to support our project. And then when they're not in use for the project, they could potentially be used to support the community.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. All right, we're forging ahead. Catherine.
All right, next one. We got Graham wrapping it up. Three topics here. So soils, environmental data, some seismic, and we'll end with the last question that came in from Sean regarding potential use of the Twin Cities site. So Graham, you want to pick it up?
Yep.
All right, Graham, and it's 4:49, Graham.
Okay, got it. So this first set of slides is going to talk about some environmental data that we'll be collecting as part of the project that focuses on year one, and this is specifically to address the question here, asking about different types of potential background occurring minerals or contaminants and how the RTM may compare to those levels and so on. So next slide, yeah. So here, just again, I want to reiterate, this is the year one testing program because that's what we've actually got scoped out right now. There will be years following that, but here just focusing on year one. We have 3 different targets for the sampling that will be conducted. There's what's identified as background surface conditions, and so that's very shallow, 0 to 3 foot type sampling that will be done. Next is areas where there will be shallow excavation. So this would be, for instance, at the intakes, also the southern complex, where there will be surface excavation where the soils will be reused on the project. And then lastly, collecting samples down at tunnel depth, which again would be representative of the material that would be largely constituting the RTM, so down at the 115 to 160 range. In terms of the constituents that'll be tested, they're listed here on the right side of the slide on the table, so you can see everything's listed there. There's aromatic hydrocarbons, all sorts of metals, soluble metals, methyl mercury, mercury, soluble mercury, hexavalent chromium, soluble hexavalent chromium, and a whole host of organic compounds and hydrocarbons. So all of these constituents will be tested for with the samples described there on the left side of the sheet. The schedule is to conduct this investigation between October of this year through June, and the results being available mid-summer 2021. Next slide. But here, this just shows you where those samples will be collected. Again, grouped on the left with background 0 to 3 feet, shallow 0 to 10, and then tunnel depth. And then on the right side, you can see the locations of the actual sample collection points there on the purple dots and how they compare to the various alternatives or options of the project. So in terms of background sampling, that would be on Glanville Tract, Staten Island, Bolden, and Lower Roberts. The shallow 0 to 10 foot range near surface sampling would be conducted at the intakes and at the southern complex on Byron Tract. And then in terms of deeper borings that would be used to collect samples from tunnel depth, again at the intakes, Glanville Tract, Staten Island, Lower Roberts, and then Byron Tract at the southern complex. So I think that's it for the environmental testing. So okay. I'll pause and see if there's any questions on that information.
Any clarifications? Okay, keep going, keep going.
Okay, so next is to address the work being done by the DCA related to earthquake analyses or seismic studies. So next slide, please. So the DCA is performing or will be performing seismic studies. This goes beyond the coming year, although some of this is included in the current year. So I want to be careful about that. This is not year one work. This includes year one and well beyond. There will be a variety of studies, field and laboratory tests performed to assess the seismic risks at each site. But I want to be clear to point out that these are to ensure that the features that are being designed or modified for the project meet all of the seismic standards for building codes, regulations, factors of safety and for stability and performance. So this is all focusing on the project facilities and anything that we touch, which does include existing levees that would be affected by the project. So in terms of the studies and testing, there's a series of seismic cone penetration tests that are planned. Those actually will be performed in the year one testing program. There's downhole suspension logging, which is another way to sort of accomplish some of the same type of testing from the seismic cones, looking at shear wave velocities in the subsurface. There will be a series of studies related to the West Tracy Fault, including test pits and excavations, boreholes, laboratory testing, all hosts of different studies associated with that. And then also identifying some very high-end strength testing that will be performed, trying to mimic the conditions that occur during liquefaction when pore pressures increase in the subsurface and strength loss is more common. So there is laboratory testing planned to mimic that and evaluate the strength of those soils under that type of condition. But again, to reiterate, these analyses are being done to ensure that the project facilities meet seismic criteria for foundations and that all the physical structures are designed to adhere to those criteria. And that does include, again, existing levees that touch the project.
All right, Graham, we do have some questions. Are you done with this portion or do you have another slide or two?
No, this is it for that. I have yeah, that's it for seismic.
That's what I thought. Okay, we have a few hands up. Gil Cosio.
Yeah, just a question regarding your seismic testing. Graham, are you going to be testing, say where the intakes are, there on the Sacramento River levee. You're going to be testing some of the levees that protect that area, like the railroad to the east and RD 813 to the southeast that protects it from the Snodgrass, Slough, McCallum, Cosumnes flows. And similarly, on the Twin Cities side, it's close to that railroad east of there, and that's had problems during floods. And then as you move down the tunnel path, or you can be testing all the levees along the path also.
Okay, so I think the short answer would be, Gil, the short answer is yes. I mean, once there is a project, there would be a series of investigation programs that would build on one another as the design level investigations are conducted. And they would test for all the normal geotechnical properties, including the, whether it be the density or consistency of the levee or the soils underneath it, and then analyzing how those soils would behave not only under static loading during flooding, but also looking at during seismic shaking conditions. All that would come, Gil, but it's what's listed here is a pretty, it's a batch of studies that will be conducted for the project. Some are pretty far out. And I think what you're talking about would absolutely come into play, but right now we're pretty limited with what we can do.
Do you think the project will build up some of the levees that protect some of the shaft locations and whatnot?
There are plans. Yeah, we do have included, and I know you remember this, Gil. We've talked about it on a couple of the projects. Depending again on what the eventual project is, there will be more detailed analysis and effort associated with it. But for now, for the purposes of the CEQA document, we are assuming repairs to the existing levees on Bolden Island, if there's a launch site there, on Lower Roberts Island, if there's a launch site there. And then we've done a variety of other vulnerability studies and assessments to try and figure out how to mitigate flood risk within the project. But that's going to continue to be an ongoing effort as we collect more data and do more analyses.
Okay, Anna Swenson.
Thank you. So I remember back in a couple iterations of the same project that there was a lot of local concern about the vulnerability of the tunnel segments to seismic activity. And so I'm wondering if that has been resolved. It looks like the same segmented tunnel design. And I know that there was great concerns about those segments shearing and then creating an underground flood that would basically, destroy the area. So that's one of my concerns. And then, I haven't been here for a million years, but I've been here for a little while. And I know a lot of people have tried to analyze the seismic risk in the Delta through modeling and have not been very successful. And so a word to the wise, try not to use the same failed modeling that other folks in the past have used, because it's not very correct and not very accurate. So, but I'm really interested in the segments, because that's a great concern to us, is that those segments will shear off in a seismic event and then create underground flooding. And then the whole purpose of the project would be, for naught. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, well, and unfortunately, I'm not the tunnel designer, so I can't give you real good answers on how the liner segments are being designed to accommodate these conditions. But I can tell you that a lot of the data that's shown here that will be collected and evaluated are to ensure that the tunnel will meet the codes and regulations required under that type of seismic loading. So for instance, the West Tracy fault studies, those are all absolutely 100% related to what could happen to it with a near source seismic shaking event. And every element of the project will be designed to meet factor of safety requirements as established by the seismic design criteria.
All right, Mel Lytle.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I might have missed it, but do we know a date when year one is starting, or is that just sort of a hypothetical?
The date for the year one investigations actually I'd have to check with Andrew specifically on when things started, but it was listed to start in October. I mean, I know some of this work is being planned and initiated now. I'm just not exactly sure, Mel, of the exact timeline on when some of those are going to be conducted, but it really has begun now, year one, and we're expecting to have the results in the summer of next year, 21.
Okay, and I was a little slow to raise my hand. I had just one comment regarding the soil sampling map that you had there. It looked like, you know, a half a dozen sites over, you know, the extent of the tunnel reach, you know, over 47 miles or 50 miles. It seems very minimalistic as far as that's concerned, and I would hope that in years 2, 3, or whatever, if this perpetuates, that becomes much, much more detailed, because contamination can be a very localized issue.
Yeah, good comment, Mel, and it will be.
Yeah, this is just to let you know what information we might have in the next year. That it wasn't intended to represent all of the work that we'll be doing.
I appreciate that. And your seismic analysis, is there a specific criteria that is developed? Are we looking at the facilities will meet, you know, 7 on the Richter scale type event or something to that nature, or what is that?
You know, each of the different facilities has a different design criteria. Some of them require a site, you know, a site-specific response spectra be developed for a seismic event. Some require just you know, stability analysis under seismic loading. So there's a whole range of different criteria that would apply depending on the type of structure. But we have developed the seismic design criteria for the entire project that includes each of those individual facilities.
Will that be part of the EIR, or is that a separate report, or what?
I guess I don't know the answer to that, Mel. If it's, I assume it will, but I don't know the.
Carrie's on. Carrie, do you want to answer that question?
So I don't think that the design criteria will be part of the EIR, but the engineering reports will be public at that point, and so you'll be able to see the backup in those reports.
Okay.
Great. We have, just to clarify, so Barbara has her hand up. I hear Cece physically has her hand up, and then there's a concern. Gia, did you want to speak, and did someone accidentally put your hand down? We want to make sure that we didn't do that.
I had a brief question about the seismic criteria.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll do Barbara and Cece. Go ahead.
Okay, I just, my concern, because the intakes are so close to Hood, is during the seismic criteria, is there going to be any consideration taken about, you know, homes in the area? We do have a lot of historic homes and things are very old in the Delta. So I was just wondering about that versus, you know, areas where there aren't any houses and it's just farmland.
Yeah, so I think what you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gia, but I think what you're referring to would be vibrations induced by the project, and could those affect old structures around the community of Hood? Is that right?
Yeah, some of them are very fragile.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine, and that would be also future work, Gia. But it's and some of this would be applicable to that. For instance, where we get a sense of how the soil responds due to shaking. Some of that may be able to be translated over to the much more minor vibrations induced by the project, but they could still have applicability. But this is generally related to an earthquake type event that would create strong shaking in the Delta. But your point is taken, and there will be certainly analyses associated with those types of effects as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, Barbara, go ahead. Barbara Bergen-Perea.
So Lawrence Livermore Laboratory right now is doing outreach to landowners in South and Central Delta around a deep in carbon sequestration project, deep wells that go significantly underground. I've read through the documents. I'm certainly no expert on the topic. I have lots of questions about the project, but I think one of the things that just keeps striking me, that project comes with a whole set of impacts for the Delta. 1,500 trucks a day for a couple of years. What's the water quality potential for leakage from the carbon sequestration, the injections? And it just sitting here listening to that you're doing fine work to answer the questions that we pushed on before about seismic studies. I'm worried about overlap between the two projects. I think they're on a similar timeline to this project. And I think people with plans and agencies need to be talking with each other to look at what that cumulative impact could be, especially on any type of seismic activity.
Okay, so I think that's very good to know, Barbara, and I'm making a note of that. I'm not aware of the project, so we'll have to do some digging to see what types of overlaps we might have, but certainly the collaboration is warranted. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Cece and then Mike Moran. Cece.
I'd like to know what seismic codes you think will apply to the tunnel lining.
I don't know exactly, Cece, only because I'm not a tunnel engineer. I'm not a tunnel designer, I'm sorry. So that would have to be probably a follow-up question. I think it could be, Val, what do you think? How best to
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and put that on the Q&A matrix and then we can answer it at a future point.
Yeah.
But great question. You stumped us. All right, Mike Moran.
Thank you. Thanks, Barbara, for jogging my memory here. Nothing to do with seismicity, but as far as the cumulative impacts here, just a heads up, the Contra Costa County is just in the early stages of plan approval for 2,000 unit development adjacent to and east of Discovery Bay. So I know it's not in the tunnel alignment here, but just as far as truck traffic and things like that, that just happened in late September. Thanks.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, Graham, go ahead.
Okay, so then the last subject here, next slide, please. This is regarding consideration of using Twin Cities site, the post-construction rehabilitation of that site to establish upland foraging habitat for greater sandhill cranes. And so we did some digging into that concept. And so I've got on the right side just a comparative graphic so that you can get a sense of what this could look like. And Sean, I acknowledge this is just kind of putting the idea out there, and there would certainly be opportunity to refine this and so on. But just to give a sense of it, this is kind of what it would look like. On the right, you're seeing in the orange, that's the size of the stockpile for the 6,000 CFS project. It's similar for Eastern and Central. It's about 100 acres of RTM, about 20 feet tall. And so instead, we looked at establishing a lower terrace that could be established as upland foraging, and establish that terrace. And now I'm going to switch to the bullets on the right, on the left, establishing that terrace just above the recurring floodplain. And that floodplain set at elevation 19 is actually the Consumnes River 100-year floodplain just on the other side, on the east side of the railroad embankment. So that's actually the Riverine 100-year floodplain. But to be conservative, we started and said, okay, well, if we were going to set a platform, a plateau just above that, what would it look like? And so that's where you see this other larger kind of green shaded area. The plateau would be about 4 to 10 feet high to be just above that elevation 19. And that range in height is because the site slopes from east to west. It would consume about 270 total acres, but it would be an overall lower plateau compared to the RTM stockpile that we've got in orange, which would be for local borrow and local uses. But to explore this as a concept, we created these two sort of differing examples as brackets for what might happen. Some differences in the effort would likely require deeper stripping of the site initially to provide a lot more native soil to reestablish vegetation on top of this whole plateau that we're talking about here. That would be reestablishing reoccurring vegetation there. And then we, similar to the other restoration activities that we've already talked about, you know, add amendments and cross rip, spread the topsoil, cross discs. So none of that's really all that different. Final grade and level, again, very similar. Now, the last two steps would be different depending on the crop type that was going to be planted. There may be a need for irrigation. And I think that would also depend on the season that this site would be expected to be used for foraging. There, you know, in terms of, from what we understand, I'm sure Sean, you'd have a lot more input here, kind of looking at these different options for foraging crop. Winter wheat, native grasses, those could survive without necessarily having dedicated irrigation, but you can imagine those would only be maybe viable forage during the time of year when those things are growing naturally. Alternatively, corn, pasture, alfalfa, all that would require some sort of dedicated irrigation for the site. And then another consideration is just that some of these may also be able to support Swainson hawk and whitetail kite, given the other concerns of the region. So this is just a concept. It's not a decision by any stretch, but it represents kind of a different approach to how the site might be restored post-construction.
All right. So again, this is not an official plan. This is a concept to give a sense of what direction is under consideration, correct?
Right,
Well,
that's right.
Yeah, it's just to let people know what that would look like if it went in that direction.
Got it. Okay. So Anna Swenson, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so, you know, this is a area of special interest to me. So the first thing I want to point out is that you don't have a willing seller. The person that's already owns this property already does foraging. There's a plan already in place to create potential, you know, crane habitat and forage that would be well established and well in place before this project even breaks ground. And so I think you guys are going to have to consider a different site. I don't think that this site is going to be what you think it's going to be. And it really bothers me to see someone's property laid out as a potential when you haven't had a discussion with them. And so I really urge you, this is supposed to be a project where we're trying to work together and make this beneficial for all. And this type of a graphic takes you guys back. You lose credibility because you're literally taking someone's land that they've owned for multiple generations and you're making plans without even having a discussion with them. And so I want to urge you again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I really want to urge you to not make assumptions. You're coming in and attempting to do this project, and what you need to try to find, if you possibly can, and I don't know if you can, would be willing participants. But I don't think that you're going to get any willing participants if you continue to make these great assumptions. And I understand this is a prototype and, you know, an idea or whatever, but to folks like me, it feels very disrespectful. And I know the owner of this property, and I know how many generations he's been there, and I know that you're going to put your upland foraging on his great grandmother's home. And so,
Anna, I hear you, and
Yeah.
I know you've brought this up several times, and I think our response is always the same, which is we don't have a project. We're not talking to specific landowners. There is no project. And so, and I think it's, again, I remember having a similar response the last time. I think it's, you know, I think it completely the opposite. We're sharing this, we're showing this. There's nothing hidden about this exercise. And so, I'm sorry, I disagree. I understand that there is a human element to this and there is an owner to this property, absolutely, but currently there is no project.
Well, and one other note is there is no project. There is a property acquisition process that we're not anywhere near as a group at this point, I believe, but also I think there have been some discussions about reaching out to some key landowners. Nasli, do you know if there's been any attempts to talk to this landowner?
Yeah, I want to just piggyback on what Graham said, but as you mentioned, Anna, the images are showing up on our tours and in our map books. And so we did courtesy calls to folks whose sites were being used on these maps and materials. And I kind of appreciate you for bringing that up a while back. That said, if you know the owner, I would actually love the contact info. We have tried to get in touch with the owner several times and have just had no luck with the resources that we have sort of at our disposal to get in touch with folks or find the sort of phone number of owners and things like that. So if it's actually somebody, I know you bring it up, it's not us trying to avoid the conversation. They may just said, we don't want to speak with you or whatever, but we have reached out with the phone numbers that we found and have received no feedback. So if you're okay with me emailing you afterwards, and if you do know the person and they'd like to have a conversation again, even if it's just a heads up on the materials, that's not something that we avoid. We've tried to do that with everybody who's been featured on these drawings.
I just think it's really important to hear Valerie's words, which is there are other ways of land acquisition, which means eminent domain. And so that's what the people in the Delta are
hold on, Anna, that's not what I said. I said that there's a process for working as a group to be able to address these issues, and it's just not there yet.
And eminent domain is one of them, right?
That's certainly not my expertise, but again, if you have this important information, which it's clear that you're saying you do, if you could share that with Nasli, I'm sure that would benefit this entire conversation. Okay, all right, Jim Wallace.
Hi, so recognizing that this is just a concept, if you make habitat here, you're half a mile off the end of a runway at Franklin Field. This becomes a wildlife attractant. And I'd be very surprised if Sacramento County airports would buy into this, and they would have jurisdiction because they have the Airport Land Use Commission has jurisdiction over land uses. So I'm curious as to whether or not that's been factored in. And it's not just the attractant part of this. I mean, building a 270-acre attractant is a big deal off the end of a runway, but it also comes down to migrating birds going back and forth between different habitats or foraging areas. And there's a lot of good stuff east of Franklin Field. So in your concept, I think you ought to be considering whether or not this wildlife attractant affects Franklin Field and the Sacramento County Airport Land Use Commission. Thanks.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think at this point, throwing it out there as a concept, and it will be thought about further and evaluated further, particularly by DWR. And so all of those potential impacts would have to be considered. But very, very good point, though.
All right, Gil Cosio.
Yeah, this area is very sensitive to Sacramento County because it floods from two different directions. One is from the railroad. Water is allowed to flow under the railroad so it gets through it. Sometimes it flows through the ballast rock in the railroad as the Cosumnes River comes up. And then it also floods from the south along Snodgrass Slough, backing up from the Delta. And just north of this area is a community known as Point Pleasant. And it's real sensitive to Sacramento County because those people have been getting flooded for about 40 years. And Sacramento County's been helping them out with flood insurance and other things. But the hydraulics in here, because it's sheet overland flow, are real sensitive to changes. So you need to talk to Sacramento County. They've got a working model to see if it may be something that could affect the flooding in Point Pleasant.
Yeah. Okay. Good point, Gil. And yeah, your point taken, and it's valid. And there's going to need to be more work on the hydraulics of this area as we think about permanent fills and that sort of thing. So I totally agree.
All right, Isabella.
Yeah, just really quickly, just with regard to this particular slide around foraging habitat, I know my colleagues at the Nature Conservancy would certainly like to be consulted and can provide some of that feedback, particularly with regard to some of our work around bird returns. Yeah, and just wanted to uplift Anna's comments around community engagement. I think that's really important, obviously. But yeah, just would like to make that connection to our team at TNC can be helpful with this particular slide. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Sean Worth.
So this was originally something that occurred to me given the cyclical flooding in the lower Casumas floodplain there. Every 7 to 10 years, the cranes have to leave and find higher ground to forage. I had originally suggested that any position for this potential open forage area would have to be with a willing seller. And I think that the initial thing is to figure out would it actually work? Would cranes use it? Does it seem like it's biologically sound? I talked to Gary Ivey, who's a preeminent crane biologist for the West Coast. He thought it was a good idea depending upon where it was placed. I think placement's really important. And there seem to be a lot of issues with putting it where it is, right next to where it's being generated. And if it's going to be moved someplace else, that's got to be balanced with all the GHG creation and all the traffic issues of physically moving it. So I think it has some promise. I don't know if it's the end all be all for either the cranes or for our muck, but it's something to consider.
Great, thank you.
Awesome, and then Mel Lytle.
Thank you. We really haven't had a chance to talk about the RTM storage concept in real detail. I know that it was presented last time, but there wasn't a lot of discussion about it. I think, frankly speaking, I think it's probably the most draconian thought as far as this project is concerned, where you would just simply take the RTM and store it in massive piles in the Delta. I think that's, you know, whether or not you want to cover it and make it some sort of habitat, whether or not that's sustainable habitat in the future, great question. But frankly, the concept of storing RTM in giant piles in the Delta is just extremely unattractive to me.
I think all I can say is noted. I understand.
All right.
I understand.
Sounds good. It is 5:21. Let's move on to Catherine. You want to introduce the next item?
Yeah, we just have a brief introduction, a brief progress update on where we are with Bethany Reservoir. So Phil is going to lead that conversation.
Okay, so continuing the development of Bethany for all you folks, we have a couple update topics today. The basic logistics plans of how to access the 4 main work sites that you see on the photo there. And then a quick just review of how the pipelines will be installed. So we're going to start off, we're going to go through, I think the next SEC will get into the pumping plant and surge basin a little bit, but today we'll go through the pipeline. Not a lot to see in a pipeline, you know, because they turn out to be buried. So we'll just go through quickly how they get constructed and maybe entertain some questions on that. So next one, please. I'm going to go pretty quick on these. Basically, it's the 4 sites. Access to, this is the Lower Roberts launch shaft. So obviously access is through the port off Highway 4. And you could come from either direction from I-5 on Highway 4, or mainly there's a concept of coming up South Tracy Boulevard to Highway 4 as another alternative, and I'll show you how that gets developed on the next slide where we cover the next one, because it shows that as well. So here's the first, oops, no, go ahead. Here's the first maintenance shaft south of the Lower Roberts launch site. So again, this is where you can see how South Tracy Boulevard gives you an alternative path coming up off the 205, 580 area versus the I-5 path. It still avoids the bridges on Victoria Island, so it's less of a snarl onto Highway 4. And again, these are not the major traffic sites, so that's access there out onto South Bacon Island Road. Okay, the next one is very similar for the Union Island maintenance shaft. And again, you'd use South Tracy Boulevard, either off the 205 or Highway 4, go down Clifton Court Road and up Bethany Road right to the site. Okay. of what we're calling the Bethany complex area is obviously a lot more complicated. So as you know from past meetings, the Byron Highway is not great. It's a crowded road. There is some planned development on the Byron Highway that might make it a little less of an impact up to Mountain House, and we potentially extend that up to our interchange. But the primary site is really coming off the 205 and 580, basically through some of the lesser used county roads, West Grant Line to Mountain House Road. There's a small hamlet there at the intersection of West Grant Line Road and Mountain House Road that we would build a interchange with basically a traffic circle away from them so the traffic doesn't go through their little hamlet, and then approach the site from the south there. And there's obviously some roads around to get to and around the site, and also up to the Bethany Reservoir end on a new haul road that goes up around the conservation easement in that area. And so now moving ahead to the, excuse me, the pipeline route. So you can see the pipelines come out of the pumping plant at the pumping plant and surge basin. They route up to the reservoir with two short tunnel sections along the way. So let's talk about this pipeline construction. Next one, please. So basically, you're gonna, the aqueduct for a 6,000 CFS project is 4 parallel 15-foot diameter pipes. Now there's 6 shown. The 2 on the outside are just showing where we would stockpile pipe while we were building it. So we would lay it out there and then set it in the trench. But there's, so the overall trench for the 4 pipes is that darker gray. That's about 140, 160 feet wide. It's about 12 to 15 feet deep. So you can see it's not completely buried, and then we're gonna mound over the top, and that will minimize hauling of material so that we can kind of dig out what's in the bottom and help use it to make that backfill around the pipes and use the material from the site to bury over the top. This is almost identical to what the Central Valley project did on the Jones Aqueduct that we actually crossed on the way up there. So we're going to backfill the trench with basically soil cement. We're going to take the excavated material, mix it with a little bit of cement and water, and use that. That's a really good bedding material for the pipe, and allows us to reuse the material we dig out. And then there'll be space on each side. You can see the overall work area for the 4-pipe aqueduct system is about 400 feet wide. That includes places for us to do the temporary laydown of the pipe on either side, and to temporary stockpile the material while we move it in and out to use it on the site. And in the end, actually, we consume all of it back into the trench. We actually use some of the spoils from other parts of the project to help fill in over the top. And then the other point I wanted to make is, you know, when we get to a road or something, we wouldn't do this mound over the top. It would be underneath, and there would be facilities provided for drainage in the areas where drainage needed to come past it. Then there's the tunneled section, and you can see there's a profile of the tunnel portal. That's that heavy black line there. So the pipe would come in from the left. We'd have an excavation here for the tunnel portal. In the beginning, you would build the tunnel, which is sort of the bluer lines, and then later on you'd come in, lay the pipe, and you'd put it in the tunnel and weld it into place in situ. It's big pipe, and they have these special cars that drive into the tunnel and set the pipe into place. Now this tunnel is a little bit more interesting. Well, I don't know if it's more interesting. It's different than the other tunnels we've been talking about with segmented liner. This is a weak rock area, and we would construct it with what's called a road header tunneling machine. You can see those in the pictures on the lower right. Basically, it grinds the material out, and then they put it in low buoy type hauling vehicles that pull it out of the tunnel, and then they build support systems as they go to support the workers and make it a safe working place and allow us to put that pipe in. So again, we put the pipe into the tunnel, and then the space between the tunnel and the pipe would be filled with grout. And basically we have a steel pipeline tunnel when we're finished. So that was just kind of a quick summary of how that aqueduct would get built. So any questions, I'd be happy to entertain.
Sure. Anna has her hand up. Anna?
Yeah, so Tracy Boulevard, have you ever actually driven on Tracy Boulevard?
Yep.
I really worry because the roads down there, I can't even imagine like construction traffic like impacting them. So I really hope that you're like reaching out to the local community down there and talking with them, because I've been on Tracy Boulevard at rush hour and it's very congested. And so I can't imagine increasing that with truck traffic. It just seems like it's something that whole area down there, those roads were not ever intended for this type of impact. And so I hope that, you know, just like we reached out to the community of Hood, I hope that there's some reach out to those folks that are in that area so that we're making sure that they understand what will happen if those roads are designated as haul roads or construction roads for this project. Because Tracy Boulevard is one of those that, you know, just kind of piqued my interest, like that would be terrible. So
yeah, so
thank you.
similar traffic impact analyses would be done as we showed you for the central and east. And obviously, as the project moves forward, all these things are coordinated with the counties who have the jurisdiction over those roads.
Okay, David Glosky has his hand up, and I just will also note that our chair, Sarah Palmer, is exiting as we speak, and Barbara Keenan will take the helm as chair for the rest of the meeting.
Sorry, I can't stay, but I have another commitment that I've got to get to. So all of you, thank you so much and good work. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much. All right, David Glosky.
Hi, yeah, I just have some questions, and it's going back to maybe some of the prior meetings as well, but it's around kind of this new design with Bethany. And can you remind me again? So previously there was a southern forebay that was quite large. I mean, it was like the size of Clifton or something like that. And in the new design, there is no need for that. I guess because you're dissociated the two. You're not going into the same pumping station, so they're different. But could you clarify that and explain that to me again? And then a related question is, when I look at a map, Bethany is so small area-wise, and it seems as though the forebay that you had was so huge that before you were storing lots of water down there, and now you're more or less just kind of pumping everything up to Bethany that doesn't have as much storage, and so you're kind of moving things along instead of storing it. Can you highlight or talk about any of those issues?
Sure. The main purpose of the southern forebay was to provide that sort of balancing act for dual conveyance, to allow the existing South Delta facilities and the new Delta Conveyance project to work together. So you need a certain amount of storage to allow that balance, because you're right, they share the Banks pumping plant. So we need some of that balancing storage to equalize between the two so that they can be used together. Now, since the Bethany system does not use the Banks pumping plant, it just discharges up into Bethany and can flow down the California aqueduct, which is gravity flow from that point. The need for that balancing storage is vastly reduced. I wouldn't say that there's downstream of the Bethany system, there's some need for balancing storage in the California aqueduct system, but then they have that a small amount in Bethany and further downstream. And that's mostly for power management. So basically the southern forebay wouldn't serve any purpose on a Bethany system because we're not sharing a pump station with the existing system.
And so there are side effects, right? So in the earlier design, you have a lot of water stored in the in the South Bay, and in the new design, you really don't. You're just kind of moving it along as you're using it.
Well, as you noted, Bethany's not a big reservoir. So when the state is lifting water up into Bethany, they're pretty much, it's on its way south immediately. So the forebay wasn't so much for that downstream flow management. It was really to manage the flows that come up to the bank's pumping plant. So we would be delivering up into Bethany, similar to Banks, and it's on its way south relatively immediately.
Is there any connection at all between, you know, the current, this new Bethany line and the existing Clifton forebay? Is there ever any way to store water in there if you ever want to?
I haven't really thought about that. I don't really believe so, because by the time the water gets to Bethany in our tunnel, it's because of friction loss from the river. It's so far underground that getting it into Clifton Court would require a pump station. So I guess the answer is really no. There is no connection between facilities. And there's really no desire to have it because it's not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, in another world, I might be wondering whether I'd like to, you know, have it for other reasons, but I understand. Thanks for answering those.
Thanks, David. And Mike Moran.
There we are. Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot, Phil. Just a couple quick questions. The reason to have both a tunnel and the pipeline is because of the substrate. You're going to make a tunnel through the rock, and the pipeline is going to be through softer ground. Is that correct?
No, the reason for the tunnels are when we get to there's two of them. The first one is a short one, is to pass underneath the existing CVP Delta Mendota discharge penstocks.
Let's go back to that slide. Hey, Jasmine, can you go back one more? There you go.
So the small one, you see the scar on the photo there that goes underneath it? That's where the federal aqueducts are.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you got two choices. You go over the top of them or you go underneath. So we have set this up because of it gets pretty technical on our surge control issues. We wanted to go underneath. So we have to tunnel them because they need to be in service, plus those are really large pipes as well. So that's a crossing of two major facilities. Now the one up at the end, that is a tunnel because that is a conservation easement. And I think we showed you back earlier in some of the siting for Bethany.
Yes.
Conservation easements were a limiting factor of how we got to up there. So we're tunneling underneath the conservation easement. And because of the grades and all this thing, the tunnel ended up a little longer than the width of the conservation easement in order to accommodate the ability to tunnel underneath it. So that's the substrate is not a big driver. This is not really hard rock. We could have easily built, and I'm sure we will encounter some of the rock along the pipeline route.
Okay, thanks. And then just following up really quickly on what David said, the purpose of the forebay is not really storage during high flow events or anything. It was just to set up the water to be pumped through the bank's plant.
Yeah, it's what we call equalization storage to allow us to manage the inflow so the bank's pumping plant can pump as high as 11,000 CFS, and our project was basically 6,000. So, and then the Clifton Court system can operate up at the same capacity. So it's really to equalize and allow the different facilities to balance with each other. And, you know, part of the goals of the project are to make more efficient delivery in the state water project. And that's one of the features of that.
Okay, and there are no capacity issues at Bethany to hold banks going full bore and this pipeline going full bore?
There's not capacity issues for that other than, well, let me put it this way. The downstream canal is designed for essentially the capacity of banks. So there's really not a great, I mean, for very short periods of time, if you were taking up some of the storage in Bethany, you could overpump the downstream canal. But really, if we're pumping at 6,000, then Banks is going to have to pump at less than 6,000.
Okay.
You can't take it downstream.
That's great. All right, thank you.
Thanks. All right, I want to note that it is 5:39. We do, David, I see your hand is up. Is that on purpose or?
Yeah, there was one more thing I was hoping.
Okay.
It seems to me, and this is just a comment, you've got these two parallel systems and you've got pumping plants next to each other. And I would just think for operational flexibility, just in the future, if something happened at one and you wanted to use the other, right now they're just so isolated. I would think you'd want to tie them together to be able to have flexibility down there. Is that at all thought about or initiative or anything?
That is kind of what we're doing. We're tying the two systems together using the Bethany Reservoir because, I mean, remember, this system goes for hundreds of miles to the south. Now, the existing pumping plant could not be used with the Bethany plant. Like even on the central and east options before Bethany, remember we had to pump it up at the southern forebay in order to match the hydraulic grade line at the Banks pumping plant. So we wouldn't be able to use the Banks pumping plant with Bethany, even if they were connected together because of the water levels would be so much different.
Well, but if you did have a forebay there, then you'd have complete flexibility to work either way.
But remember that because of friction loss from the river, by the time the water gets to the southern forebay, it's 50 feet underground. It has to be lifted up into the forebay. So that would be a whole nother pump station.
Okay. All right.
All right. Moving on. Barbara Keegan.
Yes, at this point, we'd like to ask DWR's Environmental Program Manager, Carrie Buckman, to provide us with an update on the CEQA process. Carrie?
Thanks. So Jasmine, I think you can go on to the next slide. My update's pretty quick tonight, which given the time, I'm guessing everyone's going to appreciate. So this is the slide I show every month, the overall environmental review process. I wanted to highlight that we are working on sort of the next few phases. Right now we've outlined the last step we've completed. And so the last step we completed is the scoping summary report. But we're also working on the agency outreach plan, which is sort of our internal plan and process for how we're dealing with the responsible and trustee agencies for CEQA. And then we've also been working on the second line in terms of formulating alternatives and defining alternatives and identifying methods to complete the technical analyses that will feed into the impact analysis. So I think next slide, we're going to go fast given the time. So this has some updates for where we are on each of the different processes. So for CEQA, we're working on existing conditions, documenting the conditions that are in place currently. And we're also working on identifying analytical methods for a lot of the different resource areas, refining some models so that they can be used as part of our effort, and getting ready to start impact analysis. For NEPA, the Corps closed their scoping period on October 20th. They received about 90 comment either letters or emails, and they're working to process those comments. For the soil investigation, field work has started under the Soil Investigation Initial Study Mitigated Negative Declaration, and Graham showed that work plan earlier, so some of those investigations, as he mentioned, have begun and will proceed for the next year. The Community Benefits Program, I just wanted to highlight, we talked about this a bit last month, but we are preparing for a discussion of the Community Benefits Program starting in December. And we'd like to really start in December and dive in the new year, working on a framework for that program. And then the Environmental Justice Community Survey is open. We also talked about that last month, and that's open until the end of November. And so I think those are my updates for the month, if anyone has any questions.
I see no hands.
Okay.
All right. At this point, then
Oh,
thank you very
hand.
much.
Sorry, Karen,
okay.
Karen slid in.
Okay, Karen.
There he goes. Karen, man. Karen, your mic, you're still muted, my friend.
Let's try that now.
There you go.
Crap, I'm sorry. I apologize for screaming in here. I just have a quick question for you, Carrie. Thank you for that information. So are you doing the CEQA on all 3 paths, or are we looking at one at this point? I mean, it seems like we've all been living together and doing this whole thing, this dance for a long time. I would think that, you know, when will we know when there's going to be a project? And if there's going to be a project, where the heck is it going to go? I mean, I think we're all on pins and needles just trying to figure that out.
So we are analyzing the eastern, the central, and the Bethany alternatives. We're still looking at how to layer in operations to that. So I think we talked last time that there will be at least 3, but we're not sure about the different permutations quite yet. We aren't going to select a preferred.
All of this, you're no closer to coming to a decision? Seriously?
Well, we're waiting for a lot of information from this process. We need this as input into the processes that we're working on, and then we need to analyze the environmental impacts. So we're not going to select a preferred alternative until about the time that we release the draft EIR. We want to see the environmental analysis and be able to consider it and have our decision makers consider it. And even at that point, that preferred alternative will be a recommendation based on the environmental impact analysis, but we won't have a decision until the process is complete. Under CEQA, we have to identify a preferred alternative in the draft, but before we make a final decision, we need to hear from the public and understand all of the comments and concerns and questions. So final decisions won't be made until after the final EIR, which I know is a long way away.
Okay, so the EIR is a long way away. And who makes the final decision? Just, I'm sure that you've told us before, but sometimes I'm a little thick.
So DWR is the agency that's completing the document. So we will be signing and finalizing the notice of determination, but that decision on which alternative to implement is made in collaboration with the governor's office, and the governor is the ultimate decision maker.
So the governor, who has no background in water and doesn't live in the Delta, et cetera, he makes the final choice?
Well, that's why I was saying that DWR is the entity that is going to be making that notice of determination. But the governor's responsibility for everything, again, you know, I put on my idealistic CEQA hat that the idea of CEQA is to help make this clearer, to be able to say, you know, here are the trade-offs, here are the impacts, here are the things you need to know to make that decision. So that's the point of what we're doing.
I'm going to ask a totally innocent, and it's probably going to sound political, but it's not meant to. So would it matter as to which communities, shall we say, contribute more to the governor versus those that contribute less? Would that have any desire?
No,
I don't think so.
No.
Okay, just thought I'd ask.
Well, and you know, Carrie, what you're saying is, and this is a great refresher for those who don't live in the CEQA world, and you know, and Karen's saying that she doesn't live in the CEQA world. So this is a great refresher to note that it's a very prescriptive process. And so it's not that anyone's dragging their heels at this point. It literally, there's a process to move forward. There's a process for study and a point at which decisions are made, and we're not there in the process yet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I presume at that time the fiscal impact will be examined as well.
So under
along with
CEQA,
your recommendations, is that correct, correct, Carrie?
So the state is going to consider, well, let me start off with, the project is not funded by the state. So the state money is not going to be used to construct the project. It would be funded by the water agencies that receive water from the project. So they will all have their own fiscal processes for deciding that funding effort. We will, as the state, complete a cost-benefit analysis, but that will be after the CEQA document because we need to know which alternative to complete it on.
Okay. Thank you for answering my question, Carrie. I appreciate it. And you're right. Most of us don't live in the CEQA world. Most of us make a living a different way.
And most of you are probably happy about that, but I like it here, so.
Well, and some of it is counterintuitive, so we're fortunate to have an expert like Carrie to kind of steer us through all this. So thank you very much for your presentation, Carrie. And at this point,
we do have, I'm sorry, Chair.
We have another comment? Okay.
We have two more. Anna Swenson, just raise your hand, as did David Glosky. Go ahead, Anna.
Yes, thank you. So you mentioned public comment, and I wanted to make sure that there was other opportunities for public comment besides this forum. As we've stated in the past, it's become very difficult with COVID to reach out to our communities. And so I just wanted to ensure that there were other outreach, opportunities for the public to engage besides the SEC forum. And then the other thing is, you mentioned it's not public money, but isn't it a bond? I mean, I thought that was public money. Can you clarify that? Thank you.
Sure. So starting with outreach, no, the SEC is not going to satisfy the CEQA requirements for outreach. And in fact, there was a letter from the Delta Counties Coalition to Director Namath and Catherine Mallon asking some of those questions, and we posted a response today. It's on our website confirming that no, we are conducting our own CEQA-related outreach. We really appreciate the role of the SBC. We found this to be incredibly valuable and useful, and that's why I'm here every month, because I really value this forum. But we are also going to be doing other CEQA outreach, particularly during the time that the draft EIR is public, so that we can share information and hear comments. But we will be doing some additional outreach over the next year as well on the CEQA side. And then for the bond funding question, so the way that would work is that the state would issue bonds, but the money to repay those bonds would be paid by the water contractors. So all of the money to pay for those would come from water contractors directly.
Nasli, does it make sense? Oftentimes when there's materials like this, we like to send it out to the committee. Does it make sense to forward that letter or that link or whatever to the entire SEC so they have access to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. All right, David Lasky.
Yes, when the governor is evaluating the alternatives, is one of the alternatives, the no action alternative?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Barbara Berrigan-Perea.
So I just think that we need to speak in a little bit more clearly about the questions about the financing. It isn't just the water contractors. The water contractors pay for the project with ratepayer money. So that is public money. It comes from public agencies. The number of them are what they call special interest districts. So I think we should be very clear about that. I think it would be great if the DCA actually took the time to go over financing of the project, because there are really conflicting opinions on it, and you probably don't want to, but probably would bring clarity to a lot of people. I think it's much better to power through and talk about hard things than to pretend that they don't exist. There are some important votes coming up about how to pay for this project, at least for the next phase of planning, in December at MWD, one at Kern County tomorrow. So, again, the reason why I bring it up isn't just to be controversial, but when you are deciding to spend billions of dollars for a project and you fully understand the risks of the project and the benefits, it's just healthier to have a good, public, robust discussion about it.
So one of the things I'll just note is, one of the struggles that I think this entire committee addresses, and I think staff also addresses, because I hear about it from everyone, is that we have guardrails on what this committee can talk about. And that may be, well, that is one of those issues, because that is not necessarily a construction issue, and it's not necessarily an engineering or design issue. So Catherine, I'll kick that to you.
No, I mean, Carrie's right. And Barbara, you bring up a really good point. It's the water bill, right? That's who pays for it. You get a water bill and you write your check out or auto pay to your water utility. That's the money that would be used to repay this bond. DWR, essentially, just to simplify this, would would invoice in their annual payment to pay back that bond. In fact, the water contractors are still paying back the bonds that were used to build the original system. That's still not completely paid for. And again, that comes in from the water contractors to DWR because those were bonds that were sold by the state. And this would be the same thing. If it is helpful to do a primer on how that works, we could do that. I mean, it is outside the purview here, but it's something that's fairly straightforward and easy to do. As for the votes that are coming up, I think that there is information on the State Water Contractors website about those upcoming votes, but if there's not, what they're doing is looking to vote on funding for the planning phase of the project.
Right. Right.
So if you recall, Barbara, a few months ago at the DCA meeting, we did a presentation on the cost estimate of the construction project, and that was one piece of information that was helpful to them. And then in the last meeting, we talked about the DCA's budget over the next 2.5 years. That doesn't get us all the way through the planning period, but halfway through it. But they will be voting on funding the planning period. They're not, none of them, to my knowledge, are voting on the permanent project or on the design and construction phase.
They're not, maybe not fully on design and construction, but you have agencies voting to cover other shares for agencies. And that's where it gets really murky for the public. And really, it should be done so much more clearly. And as far as kind of this conversation, well, there's guardrails on this. Look, we sat through a presentation last week about why we should encourage people, or last month rather, to participate in the EJ outreach for the CEQA process being conducted by DWR. So, you know, we're not always consistent in that. And I just, again, I think it's better to have the hard conversations wherever you can and get the information out there, because just listening to the questions that were asked of you, there is confusion and a lack of understanding on how to pay.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. We can do that. I mean, I actually think, you know, maybe somebody, a combination of somebody from, I don't know, maybe Metropolitan and DWR might be a good tag team on that.
Yeah.
All right. That's
there you go. All right.
noted.
Well, then, great question, Barbara.
Okay,
Thanks
was
for
that
that.
our last questioner on this?
Yes, that is
4C?
it.
Okay,
Yes,
so now
yes,
we're
ma'am.
at 4D, and Valerie, if you can lead the discussion on SEC questions or comments on the September 23rd presentation.
Yes. So just looking at the issues that were raised specifically to the Bethany alternative, if folks have comments, if you've taken the information and either thought about it, shared it with folks. We looked at the Bethany update with siting analysis. We also looked at RTM management. There was that EJ discussion, the EJ survey discussion. We just had a comment on that. So if there's any other comments or questions that folks want to raise at this time, now's the time. Douglas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, my question is, so what is the most important factor that the Bethany Reservoir over the southern forebay? Is it the cost or the safety? What is the most important advantage of a Bethany Reservoir over the southern forebay?
I'm going to just answer this really quickly, and just from a really brief high-level engineering perspective, is the trade-offs that you're seeing is, and David picked up on this, the Bethany alternative eliminates all of those facilities that were required at the southern complex. So the forebay and the tunnel and the connections into the existing aqueduct down there, those are replaced by a pump station that pumps the flow directly from the tunnel and up into Bethany Reservoir. So there's a difference of what facilities are needed, and a slightly smaller footprint with Bethany because you've eliminated that southern forebay. If you recall, that was like 750 acres. It also gives you a separate, fully redundant system. The east and central alignment connects into the existing pump station, and that's what takes the flow up to Bethany. Here you have a much more, it is a more autonomously parallel system, and it can pump directly up into Bethany where then it flows out. So those are the engineering differences between those two options. The actual selection of a recommended alternative will come down to the work that Carrie does. I'm just pointing out at a very high level.
Less cost and less footprint. Less everything.
Not cost necessarily. That cost doesn't play into the analysis.
Understand.
Yeah.
Less engineering, less footprint.
It's really Carrie's work that drives the recommended alternative.
Yeah, and the thing that we think has promise is the idea that there is a smaller surface impact, that there is less surface area that would be taken up, and we think that that could generate a smaller set of environmental impacts. But we don't know that yet. We're studying it. We'll know when we're done.
All right, thank you, Douglas. And David Glosky has his hand up.
I think a lot of the people, like Catherine and some others, have kind of grasped my comments, but I'm going to reiterate them here for the benefit of the rest of the stakeholders. Is I personally think that there's actually benefits from having some of that water in the South Delta. And I think it could be in terms of water quality and actually in emergency response situations. And while I do think, Catherine, it's a separate system going all the way up, it seems as though you have less operational flexibility to not, before you get to that point. I mean, it's completely separate all the way up. But if you ever, have issues or operationally want to do things down below there, you're going to be inhibited by the fact that they're separate. And I'm going to try to have some conversations with people around, emergency response. And my issue is if there's 2 or 3 levees that go, in the Delta and there's salt water intrusion and you're trying to buy time in the Delta to keep, salt water out. And I know there's emergency response and stockpiles for levee materials, but having some ability to be able to flush water out. And I'm not saying it's going to be for weeks and it's not going to be perfect, but it, could provide, buying some time in some certain situations. And then I do think that in certain water situations with algae and other times of the year, there could be some other benefits. So to me, it crosses over into community benefits. And I'd like to have those explored before we, settle on a design that will preclude some of those benefits.
So let me just make sure that I understand what you're saying, is that you think that the volume of the southern forebay could provide some additional benefits under certain circumstances, in addition to serving as an equalization basin for 2 pump stations that have to operate in sequence. Is that what you're saying?
There was that one, and plus you're totally separate. That process allowed, if we ever needed to dump into the South Delta, whereas your completely isolated path now takes it all the way up to Bethany and it kind of removes that ability altogether. Okay. And you can flow it back down from Bethany. And, and I'm one guy, I don't have the resources to explore all these things, but I'm going to try to instigate.
No, we're going to try to help you see the volume that's in that southern forebay and whether or not, where it falls in the range between something that could be impactful versus a drop in the bucket compared to the water that's coming into the system.
Yeah. Okay? I get that part. And my closing remark, I understand there's a volume issue, but I'm not looking for weeks. I'm looking for hours and days. And even if it helps a little bit, that can be invaluable.
All right, are there any other questions or comments or clarifications? We have Mike Moran.
Are we still on Bethany? Could we jump over to the EJ survey?
I think we can, sure.
Okay, just the EJ survey I think is scheduled to end on November 30th. Is that still the case? And are we satisfied with the responses thus far to keep that the case?
Nasli, do you want to address that or you want me to?
I think that's Carrie or Janet.
Oh, yeah. Janet. Janet's the great person to address that. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, at this moment in time, November 30th is still our target, but we have a lot to see in terms of how things shake out now that we're past the election, and working with various partners in the community. So, you know, there's certainly some flexibility there, but our target right now is the 30th.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, our next item is 4E, public comment on item 4. And before we open it up for public comments, I just would like to commend Catherine Mellon and her staff for what I think was a really excellent presentation on the deferred SEC questions. These are questions that have been sort of hanging out there, and I really appreciated the depth and strength of the analysis. So good job, team. And with that, we'll ask for public comments on all reports in item 4. So Valerie, did we receive any public comments?
We did. We have 2 people who have signed up for public comment for item 4. The 2 people are Deirdre Desjardins and Osha Meserve. You will each have 3 minutes to provide your comments. So Deirdre Desjardins, let's have you go first, please.
Hi, I just wanted to object. I'm the research analyst and policy advisor for Delta Legacy Communities Incorporated, which supports and advocates for the Delta Legacy communities from Freeport to Knightson. And during this 3-hour presentation, we have significant questions and comments to make. And there's just absolutely no way that our organization can engage within 3 minutes of public comment, nor was any information on what was to be presented provided in advance of the meeting. So it's not possible to provide comments on it unless you try to write them during the fly. So I really object to this being presented as it is repeatedly as a public process. It's not a public process. It's structured as a meeting for these committee members. But as far as other organizations and their experts being able to participate in this, it's a disaster. And I've commented on this repeatedly, that there's not even a way to get questions answered, you know, let alone when you provide 3 minutes of comments at the end of a very long presentation. I don't know why you're structuring it this way at the same time you're claiming that it's a public process, but I find it to be very disingenuous.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
And it is cutting out input from people who are advocating for the folks who are most impacted by the tunnel project and by experts that did a huge amount of work on the construction impacts of the project.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Deirdre.
I think there's also, just to offer to Ms. Desjardins, there's certainly always an opportunity to submit questions in writing or comments in writing. So please explore that alternative if that better addresses your needs. Our next speaker.
Our next speaker is Osha Meserve. Osha, once again, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thanks. Osha Meserve for local agencies of the North Delta. I agree with what Ms. Desjardins just said in terms of trying to respond to all this information. There's really not a format for it, and we waited over 3 hours just to have 3 minutes, which is fine, but I just don't think it's adequate. In listening to the responses to the comments that had not been responded to yet, it just becomes more and more clear to me that the project is really premised on a lack of respect for local property, water rights, and communities. DWR doesn't own any of the property required for this project except for maybe a couple acres in the Northern Delta and then, of course, the South Delta facilities. All the land that would be necessary for this project would have to be taken, probably forcibly, from families that have been farming and living on these lands for generations in many instances. And then, as was explained by Ms. Buchholz, it also relies on taking people's water directly, because those water rights that she was discussing belong to the people underneath where the intakes are proposed to be built on top of existing farms and their own intakes for their farms and ranches. And so I know it may come across kind of sterile and, oh, we've looked at the water rights, but what you're talking about is taking people's land and water rights just for the construction part of it, not even addressing the operations. And I think it's not transparent to talk about water demand and give pie charts and then not to say how much water you actually need for construction. That's very important information. And same thing with the sediment trucks. You're telling us maybe 2 to 10 trucks per hour during operation of this project. And that's under a high end of exports, but it's not been told to us what the high end of exports might look like under this project. So, I mean, I think there's been certain issues that have become more apparent through this discussion, and that may be somewhat helpful, but we're really just nibbling at the edges of what really needs to get done, which is an integrated water planning process that actually takes into account local needs and is planned alongside locals. Because as you're hearing about the groundwater and surface water flooding, our area has a lot of challenges, and we are working together to try to address them. And having this project come in on top of us without being a partner, but just taking from us is not going to lead to a good result. And I wanted to add too that this goes on property tax bills within the State Water Project contract area, not just ratepayer bills. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Mazur.
All right, thanks so much. That's the end. The last person we had who signed up for public comment for item 4. Nasli, do you also want to provide your email address?
Yep, my email is nasliparvizi@dcdca.org. NAZLIPARVIZI. We get lots of questions. We welcome more questions. They all get added to the FAQ matrix that is part of our meeting packets. So regardless of whether questions come from the SEC or from questions from the public, they are included in the FAQ matrix that is distributed during the SEC meetings, as well as up on our website. We try to be as transparent as possible with making sure that our answers are public to all, regardless of who asks them or in what format they ask them.
And that's specific to DCA related issues, engineering, design, construction, planning, all those sorts of things.
That is correct. Yep. And then there are some times when, if the questions are really kind of huge and it's clear that a big group needs sort of further clarification, we say this over and over. We welcome to meet with groups. A lot of times folks make public comments about the inability to participate in this forum. We have offered over and over to have our engineers meet with the groups. We've had folks say, we're not interested in meeting with you, and then they come and complain about that. So let me just make it clear again that we can do as much outreach as you let us, but we can't force you to come to the table. If you write letters to us or say very blatantly, you're not going to meet with us. If you would like a meeting with our engineers to clarify some things, if you represent a large group or whatnot, we're happy to do something like this virtually for your specific group's interests. Okay?
Thank you very much. We have no more speakers on this, correct?
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so now is 5A, where we're talking about future SEC topics. Catherine, could you please initiate the discussion on this?
You bet. Jasmine, next slide. Okay, so I have this slide up here. This is a reminder from a slide from November 2019 when we first launched the SEC to clarify what it was that we were aiming to do here. It really was an endeavor by the DCA to work collaboratively with a group of Delta stakeholders to help solicit feedback and getting site-specific information on how we might be able to modify our engineering work to reduce the effect of the project. And I think that we've had really great discussions over the last, close to a year now. And as we presented in a previous presentation, there's been a lot of changes to the design as a result of these discussions. By no means that we have support here for it, but I think that the dialogue has been informative and constructive. We also set boundaries around what it was that we were trying to achieve, that this was a DCA SEC, and so the point of our process wasn't to talk about the other alternatives. That sits with Carrie and her team, and the comment sits with the CEQA process and the outreach that she'll be doing. And that we weren't here to talk about the operating parameters that DWR would be modeling or any of the assessment of the impacts that are required in the CEQA process. So again, it's just a reminder of what we set out to do when this was first formed. Next slide. So when we originally formed the committee, we had just one alternative that had been identified and given to the DCA, and that was the Central and East Corridor design. We experienced delays with the issuing of the NOP, and the DCA had significant changes that happened as a result of this discussion and moved facilities and rethought through some of the design. So we had thought that we would finish in mid-year, but we actually have finished closer to the end of this year, Q4, and I presented that in a slide at the last meeting. The next click. So where we are now is we've pretty much wrapped up the Central and East Corridor, and we're actively focused on the Bethany alternative, and we plan to wrap that up at the end of the first quarter of next year. So obviously we want to continue working in this fashion with the group to get through the Bethany design. Next slide. So we have a proposal here that continues the SEC process through the end of 2021. In this proposal, we would continue to update on the Bethany alternative until that had finished. There's been a strong interest from this group to participate in providing feedback on a community benefits program. And one of the things that needs to be done next year is to come up with a framework for that program. So we would use this committee as one forum of many to solicit that feedback. We'll be doing geotech work over the next 6 months to a year, and this is a good forum or a useful forum to get that data out to the public and then allow the SEC members to ask questions. And then also, as Carrie does her impacts assessment of the design, during that process, it'll be iterative in that she'll come back to us and identify some impacts and look for us to do some design changes to the design to help address some of those issues. So that could be in areas such as air quality, noise, traffic, terrestrial resources, agricultural resources. And what we thought might be helpful is, as she requests us to look at changes to the design, that we bring those changes back to this SEC committee and allow you to see the types of changes. In some cases, there may be a solution on the table. In some cases, there may be multiple ways to solve that issue, and we would be soliciting feedback on preference around alternatives. But so what I want to be respectful of the fact that this extends beyond what the original mandate was. It is consistent with the original goals of the group, which was to solicit impact on the work that the DCA is doing around the design and construction effects of the project and our work at the DCA. So I just wanted to throw this out there as a discussion topic of whether or not the committee felt that this was a useful process for you all to keep informed of the work that the DCA is doing, and if you were interested in continuing on through next year, maybe not monthly, but at least every other month, to continue this dialogue on these topics here.
Okay. Any questions or comments, clarifications? I have Jim Wallace with his hand up. Jim?
Hang on. Yep. Okay. Double clicking.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah. From a global perspective, yeah, I think we should continue to do this at some level. I think that's a good idea. I think it's also a good idea for the SEC to participate in the community benefits program framework, if you will, trying to help identify the shape of the table as we move forward in community benefits programs. The one thing that I don't agree with, and you didn't, and actually it's in contradiction to your number 4 on one of your slides, is that during tonight's meeting, there was a suggestion that SEC members help identify places for monitoring, noise monitoring. That to me is direct involvement in CEQA. And by the way, Karen Mann, I do live in the CEQA world. So and then I think we've been on a slippery slope many times. And so, I mean, I don't want to throw cold water on what could be a good idea, but I do want to point out that I believe that now we used to be dipping our toe in CEQA. I think we're up to our knees. So from my perspective, that's kind of the way I'm seeing things going right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah,
All right,
Jim, I guess Carrie and I just want to respond. Carrie and I have had a couple of conversations on that, and you know, there's an agreement that particularly around the design changes that are coming back to us, they do fall within that DCA design purview, and that that does fall within the original boundary conditions of the process. We just thought that we would end at the point that we hand over that initial design to her, and what we're talking about is just continuing to keep you informed on the iteration process that takes place and what comes back to the DCA to deal with from an engineering perspective. It wouldn't be a forum to debate the mitigations that were found. That clearly sits with Carrie.
Yep,
Okay.
what Catherine said.
Okay, Anna Swenson.
Yeah, so I would be happy to spend more time talking about the really, really important things that will have direct impacts on the communities, like air quality and noise and traffic and, you know, crane and how to protect our agricultural resources. And those things are all really, really important to me. So I would, as much as I hate looking at that schedule, I would be willing to continue to participate, because I think that you guys really need our input and our voices to help make sure that, you know, you have some realities and some parameters as far as this project goes, and you don't know unless you're here, and y'all don't live here. So that's just my 2 cents. The community benefits part makes me feel very uncomfortable, because as I've stated before, I'm of no interest of deciding who's going to sell who out. So as much as I want to participate, that would be, I really would like that to be the focus, is on the air quality, the noise, and the traffic, and the cranes, of course. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. David Glosky, and then Gia.
Yeah, I do appreciate the opportunity to have the information flow in both directions and hear what's going on, and then also to be able to provide some input and maybe some influence here and there. So I think it's been really positive, and I think there's lots of value to just keep going and doing it.
Thanks, David.
Awesome. All right, Gia, and then Karen Mann. Gia Moreno.
Just to kind of piggyback off of what Anna said, I would like to be as much help as I can. I feel like Hood was a little bit late to the party, but we're here. And I think that there just needs to be more done with engaging with the communities, especially when, right now I know it's a little bit hard, but especially with passing out some of the information in hard copy, or at least having it available to some of the communities in the Delta. I know that it was really appreciated when the items that Anna gave to me were passed out to everyone.
Yeah, and Gia, I appreciate that. And I know we spoke a little bit of that at the orientation. More than happy to sort of keep that going as long as we have access to our office and printers and all that, or we'll figure it out. But if others are doing outreach or working in communities that have a hard time accessing, just have bad kind of connectivity like Hood, let us know. And if we can work on sort of more creative outreach strategies, it's not even creative to print things out. That's probably the original way of doing it. More than happy to do so.
Thank you, Nazli. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, Karen Mann.
Well, you know, I work as an expert witness an awful lot. Not that it matters to you guys, but I just thought I'd share that because what I'm going to say next is going to make sense. And in the world of appraisal, there's many people that want to offer me, shall we say, things like gas for my boat or things that will, you know, little sparkly things. And the problem with that is then I would be guilty of quid pro quo. And so my big concern, you know, to me, I'm looking at what, you know, the project, if it's feasible, you know, that whole thing. We're not a part of CEQA, but we're looking at the feasibility and we're trying to provide input. But if we do this in order to get that benefit, or if I get a fire station, or if I get this, I get that, that's quid pro quo. And, you know, then I'm guilty, and so are you. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I'm very uncomfortable with that kind of concept. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Val, can I just talk a little bit about the framework?
Yes.
So when we're talking about a community benefits framework, we're not talking at this point at all about trying to decide what the benefits are or who would receive them. We're trying to come up with a framework for how those decisions would be made eventually. So we're not at this point looking at saying, you know, you get a car and you get a car. It's more, I really liked Jim's phrase that we're looking at the shape of the table. And so we're just trying to come up with a framework, the tenets of the community benefits program, targets, objectives, not the specifics of who would get the benefits and how.
Awesome. Okay, Douglas,
Well,
and then
Carrie,
Barbara.
I want to add one thing to that, Carrie, is that we're not asking the SEC to be the exclusive stakeholder.
Deciders.
Exactly. What we're talking about is just having that be one of the topics that we bring to you periodically to comment on. And one of the benefits that you all provide is, certainly elected officials, certainly the various organizations in the Delta, different communities, there will be a lot of people that we solicit input from, or DWR solicits input from, on developing the framework. But you all just have had the benefit of understanding the project at a deeper level than the public in general. And so some of the things that we would solicit input from on a framework would benefit from that existing knowledge that you guys have built up over the last year. So that's why we propose that as a topic here for the group. In no way is it intended to be any kind of quid pro quo.
Great. And the idea initially came from some of the committee members, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Douglas Shea.
Okay, I just want to say that I'm getting a lot of satisfaction from the process because I have used the social media to advertise the report I have made up, and I posted on some of the websites. And I do get a lot of people emailing me asking questions. So I feel that I've done my job as a conduit. And also with my recent involvement with the EJ survey, and there are more people coming to me. So I really enjoy the satisfaction that I get from the process. That's all.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Douglas.
Thank you, Douglas. And Barbara Bergen-Perea.
Nobody's going to miss that mute button, are they?
Yeah, really.
Misses all
Barbara?
over.
Oh, okay. You want me to go?
Yes, please.
Okay, so in terms of continuing to meet, looking at what's going to happen with Bethany, it makes sense to me. I kind of see the whole community benefits discussion being like the finance discussion. I think it is much better to have transparency. I think it's important to hear what the state is thinking, what the DCA is thinking, and to be able to give input. I think things go wrong when everybody's meeting in subgroups angling for their position in this world. So I understand you're going to meet with other groups, you're going to meet with other community members, government officials, but this is, it's important. It's a place for everyone to get information.
All right. Any other comments, thoughts? All right. It sounds like there's consensus to move forward. There might be some adjustments as we move forward. So moving on, Catherine?
Yep. Next slide.
She moved it from, yeah.
Well, before the Nasli goes into getting volunteers next week, I just quickly want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to see the letter that came in from the Delta County Coalition. Those members are, you know, your elected officials, they represent you, and they've made statements in their letter to us regarding the DCA process. They expressed objections to the limited scope of the meetings and the reminders that we do ahead of every meeting, and that also that we have made an overstatement of the benefits of your participation. So I think Carrie has said this a number of times, and I just want to kind of echo that, is that this public engagement that we're doing right now with this group is not required under CEQA. There will be an extensive public engagement process that Carrie and her team at DWR manage during their process. I kind of view this as, I don't know, maybe we call it gravy, or maybe it's the early preview of the movie before it's released. Ahead of giving our documents to Carrie, we've had an opportunity to present to the public what these facilities look like, how they function, why we are thinking of putting them where we've put them. And we've engaged in a process that has led to modifications of that design as a result of your direct input. And, you know, I think that we've been transparent in this process. And we've tried to answer as many questions as we possibly can. We've kept a public database of all the questions asked and publicly posted the answers to all of these questions. As Nasli pointed out, we've offered to meet with any group that requests a presentation, and we've worked with those groups to develop very specific agendas of the things that they're most interested in. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do, in addition to the obvious, which is to engage with you and solicit your feedback and help us with the design, this is also given a forum for you all, as well as the Delta, to get a better understanding and a more intimate forum to gain awareness of the engineering work. And I think that can only lead to a more informed community and can lead to better advocacy on your parts on this project in the next phase of the process. So I hope that you guys have all found it beneficial, and I hope that you all feel that you've been respected by the engineers at DCA regarding your opinions that you've expressed and our response to those, and feel like that you've all added value to the product that we're going to be that we've been developing together and turning into DWR. And again, I say that independent of your personal support or lack or opposition to this project. So I hope that you take an opportunity to read the letter that came in and the response that Director Carla Namath has prepared on both of our behalves and posted on our website.
Terrific. And then you see the slide that's up with regard to the December 9th meeting. Can you go back, Jazz? The topics that we're looking at are the Bethany update, traffic impacts and mitigations, pump station and surge basin, Bethany reservoir outlet structure, and then an introduction to the topic of the community benefits program framework. So that's what's being anticipated for the next meeting. And then moving forward, Nasli, I think you're looking for volunteers.
Yeah, please. Karen, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you'd mentioned you might be interested in reporting out to the DCA board. And as everyone knows, it's
the number you dialed is temporarily unavailable.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes, I'm still cool with that, Nasli. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. And if there's anybody else who would like to join Karen in reporting out, that'd be great. As you know, it's a great chance for our DCA board to hear about the process, usually specifically referring to the meeting below, but sometimes folks speak about a couple months of the work that we do. And echoing what Catherine said, it's also really helpful for us because in as much as we've tried to be as transparent as possible with our information to you, it's helped us enormously to get a sense of the delta from you all and to sort of get the specific knowledge and expertise and just your love and passion for the area has really helped inform the work that we do and how we sort of perform the outreach. It's not always delivered nicely, and that's okay. It's always appreciated. So this is one of the ways, again, in which you're able to share that knowledge of the Delta with a wider audience. So thank you, Karen. And if anyone else wants to pipe in, by all means, send me an email.
And before we leave this topic, I just want to take the opportunity to really sincerely thank all the members of the SEC. It's a lot of hours and time out of your life. It's not just the time that you spend in the meeting, it's the time that you spend engaging with the community. It's the time that you spend preparing for these meetings. And I will say that when we started this process, not everybody was total fans of the idea of having a stakeholder engagement committee. But a year onward, people say, wow, you know, it's really been value added to the project. So again, my sincere appreciation for all of you and your participation. Okay, next item. I think at this point is item number 6, non-agendized SEC questions or comments.
Okay, this is taking the place of that roundtable that we used to have. Note that it is 6:36. I just feel like I need to be the bearer of that good news. Are there any other, we've done a lot of open opportunities to have some conversations on, you know, we structured that in with regard to comments from about the last meeting and discussion items in this meeting. Is there anything else that folks would like to add with regard to just issues that you'd like to address regarding the design, engineering, and construction of the project? Okay, so no hands are up. I'm sure it's either some combination of you've already said it or you're exhausted. I respect both.
Okay, item 7, public comment. So as noted on the agenda and discussed beforehand, we will now do public comment on the non-agendized items. So Ms. Martinez, have we received any public comments?
We do. We have 3 folks. We have Katie Wagner, Anna. We have Deirdre Dehardine and Osha Meserve. And Deirdre and Osha, I know that you both spoke earlier, so it's up to you whether you want to speak again, but you did sign up. Why don't we go with Katie Wagner, Anna first. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead,
Hi.
Katie.
Hi, yep, there's no Anna in my name. Not sure what you said. That's okay, thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
No worries, thank you. I think I first wanted to comment that, you know, we've been saying since July that we are not seeing a true alternative to, a true no tunnel alternative being researched in the environmental impact report or considered seriously. We're not seeing anything where there's truly no tunnel, and then investments in local projects around the state to reduce reliance of water in the Delta. And I think that's something that, you know, you're going to continue to hear from people that we need until we see that. It's absolutely critical. I think I also want to point out that, you know, someone said earlier that it's not a publicly funded project. It is. It's right now 65% funded by Metropolitan, and I live in Los Angeles. I'm a Metropolitan ratepayer, so I will be seeing that in the form of my water rates and then property taxes. The ad valorem property tax will be a huge part of how we pay for that. It's already incredibly expensive to live in Southern California, and I would really hate to see any more reasons why it's going to be more expensive, and I really don't want to have to see that. I think we also, I think I want to echo some of the comments I heard earlier about kind of the communication and the way folks communicate with each other here on this. I think that these are sensitive topics. We're talking about taking away people's homes and their land where they've lived for generations, and this isn't easy stuff. I think that we need to respect that and get every voice included. And I know you say that sometimes you'll reach out and say, hey, sit down and have a meeting with us. I think I could understand why some people aren't really there yet and willing to do that. So I think that that's just, you know, that open communication is really something that we need to keep pressing. And being at 6:40, I will stop now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Deirdre Dehardine, or did you want to speak?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So Delta Plan, so the Delta Reform Act of 2009 mandated that the state goal of water supply reliability be achieved in a way that restores, enhances, and protects the Delta as an evolving place. And as you know, when the Delta Department of Water Resources certified the previous project, one of the key issues was that the Delta Stewardship Council's draft staff findings were that the project didn't comply with the Delta as Place policy. And that policy requires DWR to avoid or reduce conflicts with current and future land uses when siting the facilities for the project. And there were multiple ways in which it was found that the project didn't comply. The DWR is also required to consider comments by local agencies, which includes the Delta counties that are elected representatives of many of the Delta legacy communities, which are unincorporated divisions of the counties, as well as local water agencies, local reclamation districts, and so on. And what I find disingenuous about this process is that you're now saying that it's wrapped up, and yet there has never been an explanation to the Stakeholder Engagement Committee members or the public about how this process relates to DWR's implementation of Delta Plan Policy DPP2. And we know that the department has been presenting to the Delta Stewardship Council that these meetings are part of that outreach. And I believe Stakeholder Engagement Committee Angelica Whaley asked directly for an explanation. So I would like to request that you explain clearly to the Stakeholder Engagement Committee members how this process relates to Delta Plan P2. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And OSHA Reserve, would you also like to comment?
Thanks. OSHA Reserve for local agencies of the North Delta. I guess the only thing I'll say is just, you know, I heard it said a few times during this meeting that we don't have a project and there's not a project. And I think that would be an interesting thing to tell the agencies that are being asked to pony up the funds to go into 4 more years of planning for a project that already has 10 years of planning that I think costed maybe over $300 million, much of which was taxpayer money that came from the general public, in addition to water district money. So I think the best thing ever would be if we did not have a project. So I agree with that. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much. All right, Chair Keegan.
Well, we have reached the end of our agenda and a little late, but good discussions. So our next meeting and adjournment, as noticed, our next meeting will be December 9th on Ring Central. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.